So, Mr. Freilich, I'm going to turn to you, and I guess some of the I read the material that you had and submitted. I read that email, and I guess some of my concerns you've now heard outlined with Mr. Lizet, and that is this document doesn't necessarily connect much of what he's indicating with Ms. Schabusiness. For example, point number 1. Taylor Schabusiness was acutely intoxicated and impaired by acute methamphetamine use at the time of the alleged asphyxiation. So there's obviously disputes about the level of intoxication that existed at the time of these events. And that dispute arose, I think, even in questioning him before when he was here, because he said, yep, I got the information that the parties, that Ms. Schabusiness and the decedent shot up trazodone, but that's not true because we didn't find any in the blood of the victim, and so that has to be false. So there's a dispute really about the nature of the intoxication at the time, but I also have concerns about its relevance. But the next bullet point under 1 is the long-term and excessive use of methamphetamine has chronic brain damage consequences. And I guess the question I have is he going to suggest that Ms. Schabusiness has brain damage? Because I guess I'm concerned about whether he can testify to that fact, because he's a pharmacologist. And I'm perfectly willing to say, in the context of a Dauber hearing, that he has expertise in pharmacology, and I don't need to hear from him again to make that finding because he testified in front of me before. So, Mr. Freilich, that's my concern.
I understand that, Your Honor. I know that Dr. O'Donnell did meet with my client and got a lot of her history, her drug use history, when he met with her previously. In my opinion, I know that Dr. O'Donnell is a board-certified pharmacologist. He's testified in many trials in Illinois. I believe that he would have the knowledge to indicate that if you use methamphetamine long term, it could cause chronic brain damage consequences. So, I mean, I think it is relevant to the issues as it relates to NGI, but what we have here is a person who has, I would submit, mental health issues that have gone untreated with medication, and then when you apply a layer of drug use on top of that, it could create a psychosis, a mental disease or defect. Additionally, I submitted to the court the records from Bell and Health, from Nicolay Psychiatric Center, the order for civil commitment and the order for psychotropic medications, and jail records. And I believe Dr. O'Donnell reviewed most of those, but that also, I think, is the link or the connection here to show that my client does have a mental health history. So I think with some sort of a limited purpose, I would ask that Dr. O'Donnell be allowed to testify as to some of these things that he opines about in the report that he provided.
Well, you've gone way beyond my first question. I think you were kind of talking about point 4, Taylor Schabusiness' use of methamphetamine worsened her untreated psychiatric conditions. I was at point 1. The long-term and excessive use of methamphetamine has chronic brain damage consequences. So I want to. You've indicated if he shows up here and testifies, Judge, if you let him testify, he's got 4 opinions. It's right here. Those 4 opinions among them are: number 1, she was acutely intoxicated and impaired by acute methamphetamine use at the time of the alleged asphyxiation. I'm not sure that that's relevant, but we're going to move on to the second piece, which is the long-term and excessive use of methamphetamine has chronic brain damage consequences. And my question is, if I let him launch that out to the jury, is that just a statement that, look, just for anybody, that might be the case? I don't know whether it's true for Ms. Schabusiness or not, but it might be, but it might not be. And the jury is simply left to speculate because we threw something at them, and now they can try to figure out whether that has any relevance for this case. Because the end of that sentence being, she has, that there's chronic brain damage consequences, and I haven't heard anybody opine that Ms. Schabusiness has chronic brain damage. And so I don't know how he's going to be able to come in and say, I've reviewed the records, she has chronic brain damage. I'm a pharmacologist, she takes a lot of drugs. Based upon the brain damage that I'm seeing from the reports, because I don't do brain damage, but based upon the reports I see, it was caused by these drugs. I'm not seeing the connection.
Well, I mean, we saw the pictures. I mean, in the basement at 829 Stony Brook Lane, there was a meth pipe, there was methamphetamine, as testified by Detective Scanlon. The history that my client provided, I think Dr. O'Donnell could opine that if you use methamphetamine long-term, it may cause chronic brain damage. He's not a doctor. He's not going to be able to say whether Ms. Schabusiness has brain damage, but he can provide that information, and the jury can decide whatever it feels is appropriate. That's within their purview. That's their prerogative to take that information and then make a determination.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Sure.
obviously we're running low on time.
Okay.
You're not going to ask him, well, Dr. O'Donnell, do you believe that excessive use of methamphetamine has caused chronic brain damage in Taylor Schabusiness? You're not going to ask him that question.
No, I would ask, could it or may it cause that kind of damage?
Point number 2, long-term adolescent use of marijuana arrests brain development. Mr. Lizet expressed concern about a number of frankly, the modifiers that are in there. I'm not sure what long-term adolescent use, actually there's a typo in that sentence. I didn't notice it till right now, but I'm assuming it's long-term adolescent use. He's going to try to define what that means, because I'm not sure how he's going to discern, what a long-term use is. Somebody could use it for a week and he might say, that's pretty long. Somebody could use it for 10 years and conceivably someone could say, well, that's not really long depending on how old they are. And then the arresting of brain development, I guess, and I'm kind of compounding the question for you, but again, I'm not seeing that there's any testimony that there has been brain development.
Your Honor, when my client met with Dr. O'Donnell, I believe that she reported that she was a daily user of marijuana. And so if he would be allowed to come in and testify that it could cause some issues with brain development, that's where I would go with that.
And again, it sounds like what you're saying is, his testimony is, here's what she reported to me. If that's true, she might have brain development, but she might not.
Right, yes.
The third point is Taylor Schabusiness was not treated with psychotropic drugs to control or mitigate her psychiatric illnesses. And I had some concerns there because, we had a number of evaluations that were conducted in this case, and I'm not clear that anybody has a good understanding of whether or not she even has a psychiatric illness. I will tell you, I'm aware of the fact that there was that one diagnosis for bipolar outlined, I think, at Nicolay, and then that was disputed, and frankly, that was even disputed by a defense. I think Dr. Lucetta disputed that. I read over her report last evening in preparation for this conversation we're having right now. That defense expert, Dr. Lucetta, wasn't sure, and there was concern about whether or not that diagnosis was accurate in light of the fact that the drug use that occurred at the time that she came in to get the diagnosis. And so one of my concerns is that if there's testimony that she wasn't treated with drugs to mitigate a psychiatric illness, here are the psychiatric illnesses that she should have been treated with. One of the problems I'm having now is the state should have the opportunity to, for example, call in Dr. Lucetta, who did a defense evaluation, to say, I don't know that I can support Dr. O'Donnell's conclusion that she has a psychiatric illness. There's a dispute about that. And so I guess I'm wondering, what can you tell me about that? And I will note, too, that as part of that bullet point, Dr. O'Donnell goes on to a conversation about schizophrenia. And as you know from what I read to Mr. Lizet, Dr. O'Donnell testified that he didn't even find a diagnosis of schizophrenia in all the records he reviewed.
Your Honor, I know that my review of the Bellin records, the Nicolay records, the jail records, and other documents that I obtained on behalf of Ms. Schabusiness, it indicated that she frequently did not want to take the medications, that she refused the medications. And when you don't take your medications and you have a psychiatric illness or a mental health problem, your condition could be exacerbated. It could get worse over time. And so I think that it would be relevant for Dr. O'Donnell to talk about that. He's got information directly from my client and from the other records, and then he could provide some information about that.
Sure, and so I guess I want to drill into this a little bit further because I want to make sure I understand what you're asking of me. And again, I'm not going to make a decision right now. I'm already running 5 minutes late, which I don't like to do. But Dr. O'Donnell, it seems what you're telling me is Dr. O'Donnell would say something along these lines. If someone has a psychiatric illness and they don't take their medications, that could be bad. We don't know whether she has a psychiatric illness or not. But if she does, and if she doesn't take any meds for it, that could be a bad thing. That's pretty much where we're at.
Yes.
The statement, psychotropic drugs do have efficacy in a large percentage of patients who take them. I'm not going to quibble over that because if he's going to be here to testify, I don't know that, frankly, having him give that opinion, I think, frankly, many people who take psychotropic drugs for things such as depression or other mental health from the Nicolay records that she had this diagnosis of bipolar, which again is disputed by even defense expert from a year ago. But is that what he's indicating? He wants to opine that if that I believe she has bipolar based upon that diagnosis, and if she'd have taken medications, she'd have been better?
I believe so, but if the court limits the line of questioning, I believe that, based on Dr. O'Donnell's history and knowledge, training, and experience, he could just generally testify that, if you use methamphetamine and you have some sort of a psychiatric condition, the drug use can, worsen your mental health condition.
Okay. It's starting to clear up, become clearer for me. Not exceedingly clear, but a little clear. And I'm going to afford the attorneys an opportunity to talk now that I've clarified things, because I've got some concerns, and they're along the lines of the state's concern about connecting things up. There are some opinions that are outlined in that document that I think this doctor could give, because he's a pharmacologist, and I'm satisfied based upon his experience that he could give those opinions. But the concern is how they tie into this case, because I'm sure he could give a lot of opinions about a lot of things, and he'd be qualified to give all of them, but they have nothing to do with this case. And that's my concern. So, and I'll render decisions on these issues, but I'm going to certainly afford the parties an opportunity to speak a little bit, find out whether there's any accommodation you can reach for limited use of Dr. O'Donnell. But if not, I'll render decisions on all of it, and I'll just indicate how it's going to happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else to bring up before we go back on the record with the jury? Mr. Saunders?
No, not from the state.
From the defense, Mr. Fraley?
There's an issue, but we'll bring it to your attention later on.
Well,
Actually-
I'd like to do, if you can bring it to my attention now so I can think about it. And then I can talk more intelligently about it, Mr. Fraley.
Could we approach the bench?
Sure. We will bring in the jury. My understanding is Detective Scanlon will be the next witness. Is he around?
Yes.
He's back there? Okay. Bring in the jury. All rise for the jury. All right, be seated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope now to undertake the second day of testimony. As you recall, we were in the middle of a witness last evening, and that's what we're going to take up. So I'll turn the case over to Mr. Lizzie. Are you going to be taking this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The state was done with questioning, but I believe that Detective Scanlon is now available for cross-examination.
I'm going to step up here, and we're going to re-administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Philip Scanlon.
Thank you.
Okay, and then with that, Mr. Fraley, the witness is yours.
Your Honor, thank you. Morning, Detective Scanlon.
Good morning.
You were called in on February 23rd of 2022 to assist in the investigation of a homicide that had occurred overnight on that. There was a 911 call from 829 Stony Brook Lane, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what was the report?
There was a report that a homeowner was calling the police from that address that they had found their son's head in the bucket,
And where was that?
829 Stony Brook.
But I mean, what part of the house?
in the basement.
And then what did you do after you got the call?
I responded to the scene, responded to the station, met with supervisors, got briefed, and was sent to the address
What time did you get to that address?
just before 6:30.
In the morning?
Yes, sir.
And what did you do initially?
I initially got there, met with the detective lieutenant on scene that was there, met with a couple sergeants that were in the address, did a walkthrough of the address. Shortly after being there, I did a quick neighborhood canvass, and then as time progressed, the warrant was signed, and then we waited for the doctor to arrive, and then we started to process the basement.
In the driveway, were there cars parked?
There's 2 cars.
What kind of cars, you know?
There was a red Jetta parked closer to the garage, and there was I think a dark RAV4.
Were they parked by the side door?
Yes.
Did you see any gold colored minivan there?
I did not.
How many cars were parked in the driveway?
I recall 2.
What was the other car?
I'm sorry.
What was the other vehicle? You said a Jetta?
There was a Jetta and I think a RAV4, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Did you see a Forester, a Subaru Forester parked there?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Your Honor, can I approach?
You may.
Detective Scanlon, I show you what's marked as exhibit 66, 67, 68, 69. Can you tell me what picture 68 or exhibit 68 is?
Did you say 68?
Yeah, yes.
68 is a photograph of the red Jetta, I believe.
Is that parked in the driveway of 829 Stony Brook?
It is.
Is there a plate number on it?
I can't see it in this photograph.
Okay. Does it depict the house on Stony Brook Lane as well?
I believe so, yes.
The vehicles that you saw on the date of February 23rd, 2022 were parked in a line, sort of, on the driveway, behind each other?
Yes, the Jetta was in front and the second vehicle was behind it.
And that was the RAV4?
I believe so.
Does Exhibit 68 appear to be the vehicles that you saw when you walked up?
Yeah, based on my recollection, there was a snow-covered red Jetta parked closer to the garage.
Okay. Then turn your attention to Exhibit 69, please. What is that?
That appears to be a picture of it from the trunk and license plate.
Different angle of the Jetta?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other vehicles in that picture?
No.
Same location?
Yes.
Exhibit 70? Exhibit 70, could you look at that one?
I have 67, I'm sorry, I have 66 or 69.
Okay, take a look at 66. What do you see in that picture?
I see a picture facing the driver's side of the red Jetta as it's parked in front of the side door of 829 Stony Brook, and then the dark vehicle behind it.
Okay. Do you know if that dark vehicle behind it belonged to Steve Hendricks?
I personally didn't check the registrations of these cars, so I don't know.
Okay. But that's at, that shows the Stony Brook Lane property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other exhibit, is that Exhibit 67?
I have it.
Okay, could you describe what you see there?
It's a picture from the front end of the Jetta facing west, so it's the vantage is down the driveway with the house on the left and the two vehicles.
The Jetta, did you determine that to be Tara Pakanich's vehicle?
I didn't run registration, so I don't know.
But it's just another view of the vehicle, correct?
That's correct.
All of these pictures do they appear to be the vehicles that you saw when you came to this residence on February 23rd?
They do.
Offer exhibits 67, or 66, 67, 68, 69.
The objection,
No.
those be received.
As part of your investigation, you did not find any gold-colored minivan at this residence, correct?
I did not.
Did you see any minivan on the street at all?
I did not.
When you came to this residence, you walked inside and then you waited for the search warrant to be obtained, correct?
Yeah, I got there shortly after 6:30. I did a walkthrough, looked around, got my bearings in the house, the make, the type of house, kind of what the scope of the search would be. We did spend some time looking for Mr. Therian, and then we decided to wait for a search warrant before we proceeded, and we also had to wait for the doctor to arrive from Dane County, so we waited.
Did you put on PPE gear?
I'm sorry?
Did you put on PPE gear, protective equipment gear?
Yes.
Okay. And when Dr. Trancheta arrived, then did you go down to the basement?
I'd been down the basement before and had come back up. So when Dr. Trancheta arrived and, then primarily Dr. Trancheta, Ms. Schwab, myself, Detective Cassie Pakala, and then forensic specialist Bailey Andre and forensic specialist Sharneski, then all went to process the basement, yes.
Okay. You went down the basement when you got there, just to check it out?
I did.
And did you look at the bucket?
I did.
When you got down there, were you in the PPE gear?
The very first time I got there was not. There's the uniformed officers there that weren't in it. There was some question about whether the body was there and why it had not been found yet. It's a question about how well we looked for it. So we did do a quick look through and then came back up. Yes, without it.
When you, Detective Scanlon, when you went down the stairs, did you see a towel over the bucket
By the time I got there, it was already removed and off to the side.
laying on the floor?
Yes,
You looked in the bucket, obviously.
I did.
Did you move the contents of the
No.
bucket? Okay. There were other items in the bucket later on that you found out about, correct?
There were.
What other items were in the bucket?
There was remains, two different specific types of remains that I observed.
What kind?
There was a human head. There was genitalia in the bucket.
Let me stop you there. What do you mean genitalia?
What I would recognize as a penis and testicles.
And were they laying underneath the head?
They were visible after the head was removed, yes.
What else did you see?
I observed a black Miracle 3 kitchen blade knife that was removed, kitchen knife. I observed a yellow pocket knife, I guess for best description, of the pocket knife with a yellow handle. There was like a head of a razor, like a shaving razor blade, a nail, Jolly Rancher, and there was a flesh material that the doctor just described as a flesh material.
Blood in the bucket as well?
There was blood in the bucket, yes.
This is all in that black bucket, correct?
The Black Flea Farm bucket, yes, container 1.
What did you do next then after you fully investigated the contents of the bucket?
So we referred to 4 containers in the home, and as just a matter of staying organized with the recovery, we went from left to right when looking at the basement. So we moved to container 2, which was the blue Jimmy Choo bag. And then Dr. Trancheta set it down on a blanket, sterile blanket that he had brought, and then he started to remove the contents of it in front of us to observe.
Fair to say that all of you were going through this together as far as looking around and investigating certain things?
Yes, we're all together at this time, yes.
And In the meantime, was Taylor Schabusiness over at the police department with Detective Groff and Detective Kemp?
She was.
And were you communicating with Detective Kemp by phone or
I
text?
don't remember which one I spoke to. I was getting phone contact from one of the two of them.
So information was going back between officers, correct?
Yes.
And the focus of your investigation was the basement of Stony Brook, is that fair?
The basement, and then, as we found the knives, I went upstairs and tried to identify whether or not those knives had come from the kitchen. So I did travel back upstairs to take a look at the knife block, and then I looked in the drawers to see if they had similar knives to the Miracle, the black handled knife in the bucket. So I did go upstairs to look at that.
How
At
many?
some point.
There were 2 knives in the bucket?
There was 2 knives in the bucket, the black handled kitchen knife. So I think it was a Miracle Blade 3 was the stamp. And then there was a yellow, like a pocket knife, the yellow handled pocket knife.
And when you went upstairs, you didn't see any other yellow-handled pocket knives, correct?
No, I've seen other Miracle Blade 3 knives. There was one on the butter dish, and there was similar knives to that in the drawer. But I don't know the source or where the yellow knife was from.
And while all this was going on, the forensic specialists, Andre and Charneski, were taking pictures, correct?
Yes.
Did you find any evidence of drug use down in that basement?
I did.
What did you find down there?
There was a methamphetamine pipe, or what I recognized to be a methamphetamine pipe on the entertainment center, and there was a green gem baggie with a crystal substance that I later checked out more thoroughly.
The meth pipe that you observed, where was it?
It was on the entertainment center, kind of a makeshift dresser to the left of the bed.
And did you find drugs?
There was what I believe to be drugs, yes, next to it in the gem baggie.
Okay. When you say gem baggie, is that a plastic bag?
Yeah, a little small, like a 1 inch or 1.5 inch green baggie.
Do you know what was in the gem baggie?
I later field tested it for methamphetamine. I believe it was crystal methamphetamine.
And where was that?
That was to the right of the meth pipe.
Did you find any marijuana?
I did not know.
Did you find any packaging for marijuana?
I did not know.
Could I approach your honor?
You may.
I'll show you it's marked as exhibits 70, 71, 72. Exhibit 70, do you recognize that?
I do.
What is it?
That's the entertainment center that the picture depicts. The methamphetamine pipe, next to it's the green gem bag I referred to, and some other items with some placards that our forensic specialists put down to photograph.
Is there any packaging from a company called Loom in Iron Mountain in that picture?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Is there any packaging from a company called Loom, L-U-M-E, in that photo?
I don't see it.
Okay. This picture, Exhibit 70, does it depict that entertainment center in the basement of Stony Brook Lane?
Yes,
Was that picture taken on or about February 23rd of 2022?
it was.
Okay. Exhibit 71, could you identify that?
That it just appears to be the same area, but a close-up of the green gem bag and the watch in front of it.
That gem bag later turned out to be methamphetamine, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Did some of it spill out on the entertainment center?
Looking at this close-up photo, there are white specks on the entertainment center. I don't know if that's that. I didn't use a narcotic wipe to see that. No, I don't know.
Okay. Does that picture show that entertainment center and contents on that item from Stony Brook Lane on February 23rd?
Yes,
Okay. Could you turn your attention to Exhibit 72? Can you identify what that is?
it's the same area. It's a close-up of the gem bag.
Is that the gem bag that was on top of the entertainment center on Stony Brook Lane in the basement?
It appears to be yes.
You had a chance to take a good look at
Yeah.
that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll offer Exhibits 70, 71, 72.
The objection,
No.
those be received.
When you did your search of the basement, did you find anybody else in the basement? Any
Other
other
than the
people down
remains, of Mr. Therian, no.
there? Did you canvass the area and make contact with neighbors?
I did.
Why did you do that?
I had some time while waiting for the doctor to arrive, waiting for the warrant to get done. So rather than stand there, I decided to do a standard neighborhood canvass, to talk to some neighbors, to see if any of the neighbors were up last night or had observed anything that they would be relevant to the investigation.
Did you get any information that was relevant?
I did.
What?
I did.
You did? What did you get?
I talked to some neighbors across the street who told me things that they have seen. I documented their information and went to the next house.
When you were there at 829 Stony Brook Lane, did you talk to Tara Pakanik?
I did not.
Did you talk to her later on?
I saw her in passing later on when they went to get some personal property, but I didn't speak to her.
Was it your understanding as part of your investigation that the deceased was frequently said to come and go from the residence on Stony Brook?
I'm sorry?
Was it your understanding that the deceased was frequently said to come and go from the Stony Brook Lane property?
That was my understanding, yes.
And that he really didn't live there?
I'm gonna object, this is all presumably hearsay. If he knew that information, he would have heard that from other people.
Mr. Freilich, response?
Your Honor, detectives gather lots of information, and I believe that, they're trying to do their job and get information that I believe would be reliable. There'd be some indicia of reliability to it.
Frankly, it's already in the record, his answer. It's in from other witnesses, so I'm not going to sustain the objection, but I'm satisfied it is hearsay, so move along then, Mr. Freilich.
Okay, thank you. We heard some testimony about that Exhibit 33, that dog collar, correct?
Yes,
You opened it up and we were able to see it. That dog collar has 2 rings on it, correct?
yes.
Do the rings, are they able to go into each other where you could pull it tight?
My understanding of the dog collar is you have to pass the chain through to join the rings so that it can be used as like a pincher dog collar. One of the chains that was by the pub table had already been done that and was a loop. And then the chain that was on the entertainment center was not looped through, so it was just a straight chain.
Okay. But the chain that you showed us, it had 2 loops and you couldn't put them through each other. Is that fair?
I didn't try it, but I think you passed the chain through to marry the loop of the collar.
Are you saying that there would be a separate chain?
That chain was as I found it.
Okay. And with that chain, the 2 rings, you're not going to be able to pass them through each other. Is that fair?
I didn't try to do it, but my understanding would be you could not. You'd have to pass the chain through to get the loop.
Okay. The Jimmy Choo bag, that was on top of the entertainment center?
It was.
And what led your attention to that?
There was some red tissue and blood, not blood, red tissue on the zipper and on the side of the bag.
And inside the Jimmy Choo bag were different body parts, correct?
There were.
There was a lung,
The doctor identified the object as the lung, yes.
piece of liver,
He identified a liver.
patella tendon,
The doctor showed me that and identified that.
pieces of skin or fatty tissue,
Yes, sir.
and there are lots of bags in there, correct?
Yes.
There was a pink and black Under Armour backpack that was found, correct?
Yes, that we referred to as container 3.
That was on the floor by the mattress?
Yes, it was at the, I guess I'll call it the foot of the bed, but it was off the end of the bed between the bed and the entertainment center.
And in this container 3 were plastic shopping bags, correct?
There was.
There were some body parts in there,
There was.
skin, fatty tissue, muscle,
Yes.
left lung. A left lung, correct?
I don't recall. It's very likely, yes.
Pelvis,
Judge,
Yes.
I'm going to object. I don't know the relevance of asking the specific questions about this. I frankly think it's unsensitive to the crime victims who are present. I don't know that it assists the jury in any way to go through the specific body parts that are located in each of these containers.
Mr. Freilich, what's the relevance of knowing where each individual?
well, my client is charged with mutilation of a corpse, so I think the state's got to prove up their case, and I think the jury just needs to hear whatever information is out there. I think it's relevant, but I can move on.
Well, I'm gonna find that it's really duplicative, because to the extent you believe it's relevant to the state in making their case, you've already gone into it. So I'm satisfied that we need to move on. I'm gonna sustain the objection.
Did you find any notes or journals on the entertainment center?
There was a bag on the entertainment center that had some journals in it, yes.
Did it have anybody's name in there?
My recollection is that when we kind of swiped through it, it appeared to be just at face value that they were probably Mr. Therian's writings.
Was it confirmed?
I know we collected them, and in the event we needed to look through them later, but we didn't.
I know that yesterday you testified about the shower. Did you take a look at the shower drains?
I did.
Did you find hair in the shower?
I'm sorry.
Did you find hair in the shower?
There was hair in the drain and at the floor drain.
Was it your understanding that Mr. Stephen Hendricks and Tara Pakinich and Ava Wheelock all used that shower, including Mr. Therian?
I don't know who used the shower.
Now, you also searched a Chrysler minivan, correct?
I was present for the search, yes.
That was at the Green Bay Police Department Evidence Storage Facility, correct?
That's correct.
Was that a gold Town and Country Chrysler minivan?
It was.
Were you present during the entire search?
I was present for when the search warrant was executed, when remains were found. I turned my focus to the doctor who examined the remains. I was not particularly focused on the continuation of the search for small items that would have been found inside the car, like registration and things that were under the seat. I didn't pay attention to that.
Did you pay attention to anything that was in the glove box as to who the owner of the minivan was?
I'm aware that the owner, who the minivan was, but I didn't see the registration.
Okay. The owner of the minivan was Scott Tomes, correct?
Yes,
And inside his minivan was this crock pot box that you were talking about yesterday?
yes, sir,
And there were human remains found in the crock pot box, correct?
there were.
And in that box was situated in a laundry basket, correct?
Yeah, the crock pot box was on top of a laundry basket.
And the laundry basket was sitting on top of a seat, correct?
The rear driver's side seat, yes.
And in the laundry basket were there some clothes piled up so that the crock pot box was stacked on top of the clothes?
I saw something under the box, but I didn't itemize it, so I don't know what it was.
All of the human remains were in the crock pot box, correct?
Yes,
And in that minivan owned by Scott Tomes, there was a bottle of medication for him as well?
I don't know.
Okay. But it was confirmed that it was his minivan, is that fair?
That vehicle, I did run the registration myself. That was on the vehicle, and it was referred to Scott Tomes, yes.
Okay.
Registered
And was it true that the Town and Country minivan was towed from the Eastman Avenue apartment complex to the GBPD evidence storage facility?
My first interaction was that it was there, and when I arrived, it was parked there. So I have a general knowledge that that's what occurred, but I didn't witness or present, I wasn't present for any of that.
Okay, nothing further, thank you.
Redirect?
No,
Any redirect?
no, Your Honor.
No? Okay. Thank you, Detective. You can step down. State's next witness?
The state calls Dr. Vincent Tranquita. Judge, is Detective Scanlon released from his subpoena in this case?
Mr. Freilich, any reason I can't release him?
No objection.
He's released from his subpoena.
Thank you.
Okay, Doctor, if you want to step up here then. And before you have a seat, if you could turn and face her and raise your right hand, she'll place you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Vincent Tranquita. My name is spelled V-I-N-C-E-N-T. My last name is spelled T-R-A-N-C-H-I-D-A.
Okay, and then with that, the witness is yours, Mr. Lizette.
Good morning, Dr. Tranquita. Can you tell the jury how you are currently employed?
Good morning. I'm currently employed as a deputy medical examiner for Dane and Rock counties of Wisconsin.
And how long have you worked in the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office?
I began my employment at the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office on July 1st, 2011.
And you are currently the deputy medical examiner there. Have you held other positions at the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes, I have.
And what other positions have you held?
I was previously chief medical examiner of the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office for approximately 12 years.
And the decision to no longer be chief and to now be deputy, is that a voluntary decision on your part?
That is correct. I've stepped down to assist with family care.
And Dr. Tranquita, what was your position or employment on February 23rd of 2022?
I believe at the time I was serving as a deputy medical examiner for Dane County.
And what was Dane County's relationship with Brown County at that point in time?
At that point in time, Brown County did not have a medical examiner's office, so we were providing coverage and assistance with forensic services for Brown County.
Doctor, can you discuss briefly your educational background that is related to the position of medical examiner?
Of course. I did my pre-medical school training at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I went to medical school at Wayne State University School of Medicine in Detroit, Michigan, where I received my MD. I specialized in anatomic and clinical pathology and did a residency at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I further went on to subspecialize in forensic pathology, and I did a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of the City of New York. I further went on to do subspecialties in forensic cardiac pathology and forensic neuropathology. I served as a senior medical examiner in New York City for approximately 8 years before I went on to accept the position as chief in Dane County.
So doctor, in total, how many years have you worked professionally as a postgraduate and post, I think you had fellowship as well, and a post-fellowship medical examiner?
Approximately 20 years at this point.
And what are the primary job duties of a medical examiner?
As a medical examiner and as a forensic pathologist, my primary duties are to investigate the cause and manner of death in cases where there is a threat to public safety. Oftentimes people think of this as criminal activity, but it can also refer to communicable disease, workplace deaths, or any death where there is an unexpected and unexplained cause at the time of the discovery.
Now, you mentioned medical examiner, but also forensic pathologist. Are those two things the same?
Forensic pathology is a definition of the specialty of medicine that I practice. Medical examiner is the name given to the role that I play in the community. A medical examiner is often a doctor or forensic pathologist, but not necessarily. There can be a lay medical examiner who is somebody that is appointed in the community to serve this function, and they may, for example, contract out to a forensic pathologist or to a hospital pathologist to perform their autopsies.
Is it fair to say that when you were working as the Dane County Deputy Medical Examiner, Chief Medical Examiner, you were essentially fulfilling both of those roles?
That is correct.
And if you could just go into greater detail as to what specifically you do typically in order to determine cause and manner of death.
When we are notified about a death, typically it begins with somebody contacting our office. Our office is staffed 24/7, and we have investigators who are on duty taking shifts. They receive the information about the call. They collect information about an individual's medical history, their social history, what medications they're on, when they were last known alive, and what are the circumstances in which they're found. At that point, the investigator will respond to the scene if needed, and then they perform an external examination of the body where they try to get as much information as they can. At that point, they notify the medical examiner or contact us, and then sometimes we respond as well if there's a suspicion of a homicide or if a death seems very complicated.
Through your work as the Deputy Medical Examiner in the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office, did you have involvement in investigating the cause and manner of death of Shad Therian, date of birth 9/7/97?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us how you were first notified of Mr. Therian's death and began your work on that case?
On that case, I was notified. Our lead investigator on the case was Petra Swab of Brown County. She notified our office that there was a suspected homicide in Green Bay, and as part of our policy, the medical examiner on duty responds to homicide scenes. So at that point, we mobilized and began driving up north to attend the scene of the investigation.
Do you recall, Doctor, about what time you would have arrived at the scene of the investigation on 829 Stony Brook?
cannot recall. I believe it was morning, though.
Do you recall who was on scene, or were there other parties on scene when you arrived?
Yes, there were.
And what types of other parties were present when you arrived?
Our investigator, Petra Schwab, was present, as well as law enforcement.
And what did you do upon arrival?
Upon arrival, typically what is done is we speak to the officer in charge, and we try to get as much preliminary information as is known when we arrive at a scene. Once that information is known, we wait until there is approval for clearance and access to the body, that we won't contaminate the scene or destroy any evidence on our approach. We donned Tyvek suits, gloves, masks, and face protection so that we don't contaminate the scene and also that we are protected. And then we entered the scene to do our examination of what's happened.
Do you recall, Doctor, making any of your own observations upon entering the residence, and then more specifically upon entering the basement area of the residence?
Yes, I do.
And what were those observations initially?
We arrived to what appeared to be a typical suburban residence. We entered through the front door, and we were directed down to the back of the house through the kitchen to a set of basement stairs. As we approached down through the base of the basement stairs, we were notified or alerted to a bucket that was present to the right of the stairs. We were then also directed that there was the possibility of additional human remains in other parts of the room as well.
And I guess before we get into the specific locations of the human remains that were collected, did you make any notations overall of that area of the basement where the remains were ultimately found?
I did.
And what were those observations?
As I entered the room, I was surprised, given the preliminary information that I had, of how little blood was really very visible on first inspection. Subsequently, as I made my way through the room, we were able to find traces of blood at various points throughout the house. Throughout the room, the basement. On some furniture to the left of the bed, or against the wall on the left, there was a dark blue bag. There was also evidence of drug paraphernalia, including a glass pipe and a baggie. There were also cleaning supplies, Clorox wipes, and I believe a bottle of Shout detergent. Adjacent to the bed was a pink and black backpack, and towards the head of the bed as well was a blue tote. On top of the bed, which was a box spring, I believe, and mattresses, were a number of crumpled sheets and bedding.
Doctor, I believe you mentioned essentially in the room the four main containers where human remains were located. Is that consistent with your recollection?
That is correct, within that room, yes.
Okay. So we've got the bucket, the blue bag on top of the dresser, the pink and gray bag on the floor, and then the tote. Are those the four locations where human remains were located in the room?
That is correct.
And can you just briefly describe the process that was used by the medical examiner's office to collect those remains?
Of course. These containers that contain the human remains were photographed as they were, or as they sat in their location. We then documented the external appearance of the containers. After that, a evidence sheet was placed out on the floor to try to collect any trace evidence that might be present either on the bag or within any of the bag's contents. I then opened each of the bags, removed the contents, and laid them out on the evidence sheet for inspection.
And can you describe for the jury sort of big picture on a scene like this, which is, I presume, unusual, what sorts of things you are looking for or attempting to ascertain as you're walking through the room and finding remains in various locations?
As I go through a room and evaluate the room, I'm looking for evidence of a disturbance, a struggle, or an altercation. I'm looking for signs of biological material which may tell me where a body part may be located. I'm also looking for evidence that may have contributed to the death. In other words, instruments, objects, weapons, evidence of drug paraphernalia. In this case in particular, I'm also looking for places that a body may be concealed or that might be evidence of movement of a body from one location to another.
Doctor, you mentioned some of those things like weapons or the instrumentality of the crime. Were those things noted on your investigation or observation?
Yes, they were.
And what was noted specifically?
On a black standing table besides the bed, there was a gray metal chain. On the dresser, on the left wall of the basement, there was also a gray metal chain. Recovered from some of the containers as well were multiple knives, some of which had a bent blade and one of which had a broken tip.
Specifically as it relates to the human remains that are located, as you're collecting those items, are you sort of conducting an inventory or attempting to ensure that you have everything that you need with respect to the body that was cut up?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to recover as much of the individual as possible to try to ascertain that as much evidence as can be gained has been collected.
As you were going through the room, did you note that it was possible you did not have the entire body present in that room?
Yes, I did.
Did you note specifically what was missing?
On my inventory, I believe I was missing the right thigh, specifically from about the waist to about the knee. I believe that I was missing as well I was also missing the left thigh and left leg.
At some point in time, were you made aware that portions of the body may be at another location?
Yes, I was.
Did you travel to that other location?
Yes, I did.
And where was that?
This was a police storage unit off-site.
What did you do upon arrival there?
Upon arrival to the police storage unit, I was directed towards a van or minivan that was in the storage unit, and I was told that there was a possibility that there might be additional body parts within the storage van.
And did you actively participate in attempting to recover the body parts from that van?
Yes, I did. My process was similar. I donned a Tyvek, gloves, protective mask, and a protective visor. We laid out an evidence sheet, and then we went through the contents of the van to determine if there were additional body parts.
And were body parts located?
Yes, they were.
What did you find?
I believe we recovered the right femur or leg bone of the thigh of the decedent. We also recovered a portion of left thigh, and we also recovered a portion of left leg from about the level of the knee to the ankle.
And then, Doctor, was there anything noteworthy about the parts that you recovered from the van?
When they were recovered from the van, they were placed in I believe, a crock pot box. There was evidence of skeletal trauma, including sawing, chop injuries, start and stop injuries of the bone, consistent with dismemberment.
Anything else about from the van?
Specifically, the right femur had been defleshed so that it was largely stripped down to the bone itself.
Doctor, I want to talk about the evidence recovery process and the chain of custody as it relates to the human remains. Can you describe what that process is?
Very important in the nature of evidentiary work is maintaining a chain of custody. In other words, that the location of the remains and the custody of the remains is documented for each step along the way. At the scene, the evidence is photographed in the presence of witnesses. It is placed in a secured and sealed evidence bag, and then on the outside of the bag, we attempted to write and document which container which pieces came from, to attempt to recreate or be able to follow the story of the evidence as it goes from the scene through transport all the way to the medical examiner's office. When we use a secured body bag, what we mean is it's an intact body bag that's labeled on the outside, and then we also place a security seal, which is intact and numbered. We photograph and document the seal to show that the seal is intact and that the seal that was placed at the scene is the same seal that we're cutting at the medical examiner's office.
And then, do you recall what specifically the process was for transporting the remains to the Dane County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy was?
Yes, I do. The transport driver was notified, the driver was mobilized, and then the driver took custody of the body bags, loaded them in the van, and then the driver and the body was escorted back to the Dane County Medical Examiner's office.
So then, doctor, ultimately, did you perform an autopsy on the remains that were recovered?
Yes, I did, on February 25th.
And where did that take place?
That took place at the Dane County Medical Examiner's office in McFarland, Wisconsin.
Do you recall who was present for that autopsy?
Yes, I do.
And who was that?
Present for the autopsy was Brown County law enforcement and our own morgue technician.
Dr. Tranquita should have done this at the outset, but I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 73. Can you identify that document?
Yes, I can.
What is that?
Exhibit 73 is a copy of my curriculum vitae or resume.
And does that appear to be accurate as of the present date?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of this.
Any objection?
Is that Exhibit 73?
It is.
No objection.
Received.
And then, doctor, I would ask you to review the photographs that are depicted in 74, 75, and 76. Have you had an opportunity to review those?
Yes, I have.
And could you just briefly describe for the jury what is depicted in Exhibit 74?
Would you like me to show the photograph as well?
I intend to publish it if I could, so.
Exhibit 74 is a photograph of a blue gloved hand with a gray label on it. It is holding a blue security seal that is present around a body bag zipper. The gray label reads 223433, and the blue security seal reads 0012227.
Doctor, do you know where that photograph would have been taken?
This photograph was taken within the Dane County Medical Examiner's office morgue.
Does it denote the seal and the fact that the bag that was received by the medical examiner's office remained intact and sealed when you received it in Dane County prior to the autopsy?
That is correct.
And can you describe what's depicted in Exhibit 75?
Exhibit 75 is another photograph taken of an outside of a body bag. A blue security seal can be visible at the lower left corner of the photograph. It also has a gray label reading 223433, which is the case number of this case. Written on the outside of the bag is sealed by PS, the initials are P and S, @ 1506 on 02/23/22.
Doctor, are you familiar with the initials PS?
Yes, I am.
And whose are those?
They are our lead investigator's initial who are at the scene, Petra Schwab.
And then, doctor, can you describe what is depicted in Exhibit 76?
Exhibit 76 is also another photograph taken from the inside of the Dane County morgue. It depicts an opened body bag that contains 4 smaller containers or 4 smaller bags inside. Containers 1 through 4.
Yeah, and what is the depiction of that particular exhibit? Is that consistent with your recollection of how the remains were recovered and stored when you left the Stony Brook residence?
That is correct.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of those exhibits and ask for permission to publish all 3.
Any objection to 74, 75, and 76, Mr. Freilich?
Yes, Your Honor, defense objects to exhibits 74, 75, 76, more prejudicial than probative, relevancy, and duplicitous arguments.
Overruled, and you can publish them to the jury.
Judge, while we're waiting for this to fire up, could we have a sidebar with
Sure.
counsel?
An issue I need to take up with the attorney, so I'm going to excuse you. We're going to take our mid-morning break right now, and it'll be about 10 minutes. So all rise for the jury.
have the court address that issue outside the presence of the jury. I can mark the photo and provide a copy to the court so that you have an opportunity to view it.
Okay, why don't we do that? Let's get it marked, and then I'll take a look at it. Mr. Fraley, presumably you've seen it.
I've seen a lot of pictures. I haven't seen this one right now. Now I've seen it.
And I would note for the record, this is the only photograph that I intend to show of the crime victim. The remainder of the injuries that we'll discuss with the doctor intend to do using diagrams.
Okay. Mr. Fraley, do you have an objection? We went through this, as I said, on the 13th of June, but is there an objection?
Your Honor, I put a lot of time into, reviewing all the pictures and did file a motion making objections to photographs that I thought were, that should not come into evidence. But we're in a trial now, and, as a defense attorney, you don't know what the state's going to present as evidence. This picture I would object to on behalf of my client. We already have a picture of what the victim looked like when he was alive. That was already presented by the state. Now they're presenting a second picture. I would argue that this picture, if it has any relevancy to the case, it's highly prejudicial. It's an autopsy picture. I don't believe a lot of people on the jury have ever seen something like this before, and it could shock their conscience and create horror in their minds. So I would object to it, Your Honor, on all of those grounds. Thank you.
Okay. And Doctor, Exhibit 77 was a photo that was taken at your office during the course of the autopsy, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, well, the issues the court has to address in these kinds of objections relating to prejudice versus the probative value is really a balancing kind of a test. And the issue that's being addressed with the court, what this is being offered for, is to demonstrate the means of death and which is an important part of the case, of course. And I ruled earlier at the hearing in June that I was not going to permit the exhibit of the crime victim's head in the bucket. This is a different, really, set of circumstances. This is a photograph taken in the process of an autopsy. We have the coroner here, who's really a witness that's an important piece of this case, frankly, for both sides of the case to hear from. And this is a photograph taken in the process of him doing his job, and one that I think, given what I've heard by way of an offer of proof, is going to be useful in him describing the means or the method of death of the victim. I'm satisfied for those reasons that although there's certainly prejudice to the photo, many things that come into a trial are prejudicial to one side or another. I'm satisfied the probative value in this case outweighs the prejudicial effect. I'm going to allow the photo to be to come into evidence, and then the doctor can explain what's shown on it and why it's relevant to the case. So that's going to be the order of the court.
Your Honor?
Yes.
With respect to the court, just as further additional argument,
You want to further argue my decision?
no.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Your Honor, though, it's just kind of, in my opinion, sort of highly unusual that this picture, of the deceased would be presented to the jury when the doctor can easily testify about, the cause and manner of death. The picture isn't going to really add too much, in my opinion, but I totally respect the court's ruling. I just want to make sure I made all my arguments to the court.
Sure. And I understand that. Photographs can be helpful to juries in understanding what witnesses are testifying to. For example, I think that argument could be made probably regarding every single photograph that's been entered into evidence, and that is, well, we can tell you what it looked like, and so you don't need to see a picture of it. photos can be helpful, they can. And so I understand that argument. The doctor could just simply describe everything, but the question is this going to be helpful to the jury? And will the prejudicial effect outweigh the probative value? I don't think so. I do think it'll be helpful to the jury, and so for those reasons, I'm going to allow it to be admitted. So that's the order of the court. Anything before before council takes a brief recess, Mr. Lezay?
Just briefly, so on the issue of the photograph, while we are showing it to the jury, I would ask that the media not show a copy of that photograph on the live stream.
I will enter an order that the media is not permitted to show that photograph on the live stream or take a picture of it in any other fashion. Anything
you.
else?
No.
Mr. Freilich, anything else before break?
No.
Okay. Very good. Then you can step down, Doctor. We'll take a break. I think we've taken up about half of the break already, but try to be back in 5 or 10 minutes. More recess. to take up before we go back on the record with the jury? Mr. Lezay?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Freilich?
No, thank you.
Very good. Then we'll bring in the jury. Doctor, if you want to come on back up and take the witness stand. Okay, be seated. Okay, we're back on the record, and with that, Mr. Lezay, the witness is yours.
I think we were about to publish the 3 photographs that the doctor had previously described. Is that 74, 75, and 76?
Yes.
Dr. Tranquita, Exhibit 74 that you previously described, is that now visible on the screen?
That is correct.
Next photograph. And Exhibit 75 that you previously described, is that now visible on the screen?
That is correct.
And Exhibit 76 that you previously described, is that now visible on the screen?
That is correct.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, Doctor, if you could confirm the human remains from Shad Therian, you received them in the form that was just demonstrated in those photos, is that correct?
That is correct.
From a chain of custody and evidence standpoint, did everything appear to be in order when you received it at the Dane County Medical Examiner's office prior to autopsy?
Yes, they did.
Can you give a general description of the process that was utilized to conduct the autopsy in this case?
Of course. At the scene, we performed the examination as I previously described. In addition, because this occurred during the time of the pandemic, we also did a nasopharyngeal swab to determine if the decedent was COVID positive, and he was. Upon beginning the examination, our first step is usually to take x-rays of the body. And this is a very helpful tool that we use to try to determine if there's any fractures, foreign objects, or what the general condition is of the skeletal system of the decedent. For this, the bag can be intact, which is a helpful way of doing it. Once the bag is opened, the next step is to begin to take as-is photographs. In other words, photographs of the body exactly as it's received, before it's cleaned, before it's washed, before anything is removed. The next step after that is to collect trace evidence, if any can be found. This can involve a sexual assault kit, swabs, fingernail clippings, everything in an effort to try to find any DNA evidence that might be useful. Once that is done, the body can then be washed and cleaned, and then we begin our external examination. The external examination is an examination of the outside of the body, not only for any identifying marks, tattoos, scars, but also to get a sense of what injuries are present, what trauma is present on the body, and if we have the entire body present as we suspected at the scene. So typically at that point, we begin to take our inventory of what is present, and then we also begin to examine each fragment to see what is present, what is trauma, what is artifact, and what is real injury.
And the process that you described as the general process, is that what you utilized here?
That's correct. And by the documentation of the external, we take photographs, we take measurements, and I take diagrams as well to try to recreate for the reader what I see at the table.
And to reiterate, ultimately, what is the goal of conducting the autopsy?
The ultimate goal is to determine the cause and manner of death. But a secondary goal is to try to document the findings that are present so that if somebody challenges or disagrees with these findings, that the evidence is there, that I can provide my explanation for my reasoning and a historical record of what goes on within the autopsy room.
And before we get into the specifics, ultimately, were you able to determine what you believe to be a cause and manner of death for Shadtherian?
Yes, I was.
And Doctor, is it typical that not only the cause and manner of death, but the findings or the bases to support those findings are generally outlined in a report?
Yes, they are.
And did you prepare such a report in this case?
Yes, I did.
Dr. Tranquita, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 78. Can you review that and identify that document for the jury?
Exhibit number 78 is a copy of the autopsy report that was generated on our case number 223433 for Shadtherian.
Doctor, is that a 14-page report?
That is correct.
And you believe that report accurately outlines your findings following the autopsy and investigation into the death of Shadtherian?
Yes, I do.
And are the opinions that are outlined in this report and the final diagnoses, are those opinions that are consistent with your medical training and experience?
Yes, they are.
Judge, I would move for the admission of Exhibit 78.
Any objection, Mr. Freilich?
No.
That'll be received.
And Doctor, again, before we get into the bases or the specifics, what was your opinion as it relates to the cause and manner of death of Shadtherian?
It is my medical opinion that the cause of death of Shadtherian is strangulation and that the manner of death is homicide.
Can you explain for the jury the difference between cause and manner?
Of course. Cause of death is the mechanism by which somebody dies. If one wants to think of it as an example, a gunshot wound of the head is a cause of death. That is a mechanism by which somebody dies. The manner of death is the category or classification of that mechanism. So in other words, a gunshot wound of the head can be a suicide, it can be an accidental death, or it can be a homicidal death. The cause of death you want to think about as the mechanical process which results in someone's death, and the manner of death is the circumstances or the totality of the story, including the investigation and the scene findings, and the history, which helps you categorize that mechanism in terms of the class of death that this occurs.
And Doctor, I'll first address the issue of cause of death. Can you outline for the jury the findings or the circumstances that support your opinion that the cause of death in this case was strangulation?
Of course. On examination of the body, I am looking for any findings that might indicate what the potential cause of death might be. In this case, on my examination of the decedent, I had a number of findings that were consistent with a strangulation death. To begin with, I had plethory or cyanosis of the head and upper neck. And by plethory or cyanosis, I mean a deep purplish discoloration or congestion of the head and neck, such that I know that return of blood flow back to the body from the head is interrupted or blocked. Along those lines, I had numerous petechial hemorrhages or burst blood vessels of the skin of the face, of the conjunctivae around the eyes or the pink around the eyes. I had hemorrhages as well of the whites of the eyes or the sclera, and also had hemorrhages of the mucosa of the inside of the mouth. These are all consistent with sharp pressure being applied to the neck and the blood vessels of the neck, causing bursting of these blood vessels. In addition, the tongue was protuberant outside of the mouth, consistent with the tongue being driven up and outwards during the process of strangulation. When I examined the tongue itself, there was a patterned indentation on the surface of the tongue, consistent with an object being pressed hard across the tongue such that it left an indentation within the tongue. There were also abrasions or scrapes on the surface of the tongue, and there was an intramuscular hemorrhage or bleeding within the tongue. This is often seen in cases of strangulation, where the tongue can be trapped between the teeth and the jaw is driven upwards and trapping the tongue between the teeth. Once I dissected down the neck, I had hemorrhages of the muscles of the neck as well. And this is also classically seen often in cases of strangulation, where blunt force trauma is applied to the neck during the process of compression, and you have injury and bleeding within the neck muscles. These hemorrhages were not only in the neck muscles, but they were also in the soft tissues surrounding the trachea, or airway, or windpipe, surrounding the larynx, or upper airway, all the way down to the cervical spine, or the spinal column as it goes all the way down to the vertebra. So in other words, I had hemorrhages going from the surface all the way down deep into the neck muscle structures, indicative of significant force being applied to the neck.
Just wanted to follow up on that particular last point. Doctor, you indicated in multiple areas where you saw evidence of strangulation. Did those same areas allow you to make some sort of determination or form an opinion as to the amount of force or the amount of time that force would have been applied to the neck?
Objection, speculation.
I think that's exactly what his professional role is.
This is a great deal of force. We're not talking about simply injuries to the superficial structures, for example, the skin. I have injuries to the very thick muscles on the sides of the neck. I have injuries to the soft tissues beneath this. I have injuries to all the soft tissues surrounding the neck, and I also have hemorrhage on the soft tissue on the anterior aspect of the cervical spine. This is hemorrhage deep through multiple layers of the neck, consistent with a great deal of force being applied and a great deal of injury.
Doctor, as we've heard, obviously there is a significant amount of mutilation to the body or disruption of the body in multiple different places. Can you describe how you are able to determine that those other cutting injuries to the portions of the body are postmortem as opposed to causing the death of Shad?
In my examination, there was extensive post-mortem mutilation of the body. And I believe that this is post-mortem mutilation because there is no hemorrhage associated with these injuries. In other words, I have multiple sharp force trauma with multiple stab wounds, multiple punctures, multiple incised wounds of the skin, deep cuts within the muscles and tendons and soft tissue, deep cuts within the bone, but all of these cuts are non-hemorrhagic. In other words, there's no blood or bleeding associated with it. These are consistent with post-mortem mutilation. In other words, there's no circulation going on. There's very little blood actually still left within the vascular system. This is all consistent with the body being dismembered after death.
And, Doctor, at this point, I intend to show you a photograph which is sensitive in nature. I intend to publish that photograph for the jury, so I'm putting the jury and also the media on notice that I intend to use the photograph at this point and then have the judge describe it. It's 77. Yes. Doctor, clerk is showing you what's been marked previously as Exhibit 77. Can you identify what that photograph is?
Yes, I can.
What is it?
This is a depiction of the right side of Shad Therian's face at the autopsy examination. In the photograph is the right side of his face, along with the grayscale ruler with the case number, and also a L-shaped ABFO ruler, which is an American Board of Forensic Odontology ruler. It shows dimensions in 2 scales. The right side of his face shows his eyes closed and his tongue protuberant, pledged between the right side of his mouth. He has abrasions or scrapes that are visible on the right side of his face and nose and cheek. At the lower aspect of the photograph are numerous sharp force injuries depicted on the upper chest.
Your Honor, I would ask for the admission of that photograph, or move for admission of the photograph, and ask for permission to publish at this time.
Okay, objection has already been made.
Same objection as before.
I'm going to overrule the objection, and the picture can be published. Yeah, and I'll note that the media is not allowed to publish this photo. They're indicating in the affirmative.
Doctor, the photograph depicted in Exhibit 77, is that now visible on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Can you utilize that photograph to describe some of the indicia of strangulation that you had previously outlined for the jury?
Yes, I can. As you look at his face, compared to the lower aspect of his body, which is visible in the upper right corner, you can see how much more purple and how much more congested it is compared to the rest of his body. Similarly, on the particularly you can see around the cheek, there are small pinpoint hemorrhages or circular petechial hemorrhages also on the right temple, which are burst hemorrhages present on the skin, and these are referred to as petechial hemorrhages, caused from ruptured capillaries on the skin surface. His tongue is protuberant and visible in this photograph coming out the right side of his mouth. Subsequently, as we examine the tongue further, we can see that there are abrasions and contusions of the tongue from impacts between the teeth. There is also a ligature oppression, as we previously described, on the surface of the tongue, which is not visible here. It's hidden by his mouth.
Then, Doctor, you talked about the coloration and how that's relevant to the strangulation as the cause of death. Is the coloration from the body, is that also relevant to your determination that injuries to the body were postmortem?
It does, yes.
Doctor, in addition to preparing a report and taking photographs of the injuries, do you also utilize diagrams?
Yes, I do.
And what is the purpose of those diagrams?
My primary purpose is to document the findings in as many different ways as I can. I take photographs. I take diagrams. I take measurements. I want to recreate the findings for the viewer, for the reader, so that they can go back to them and see what I saw at the autopsy table. I also find that diagrams are easier for people to review and people to look at who do not look at bodies on a regular basis. They're less traumatic. They protect the privacy of the decedent a little more. And I think that they are a document which I've found to be very valuable for conveying what I found in a very easy to understand and not disturbing way.
Doctor, I've provided Exhibit 79. Can you take a look at that and describe what that is for the jury?
Exhibit 79 is a copy of my autopsy notes and diagrams that that I generated on this case. It includes head and neck diagrams. It includes diagrams of the entire body and diagrams of the skeletal system as well.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of Exhibit 79 and ask for permission to publish the diagrams.
Any objection?
No.
All right, that can be published to the jury. I'll receive it, and it can be published to the jury.
And Judge, for the diagrams and the subsequent discussion, could the lights be dimmed as well?
Sure.
Dr. Tranquita, is the screen now displaying what would be the first page of Exhibit 79?
Yes, it does.
And can you note what's of importance from your medical perspective as to these diagrams?
Of course. This is the front page of what's referred to as my autopsy notes. And this allows me a front and back view of the body to depict findings. Also, a spot at the top where I can enter the general demographic features, in other words, weight of the body as it's recovered, approximated age, frame, hair color, eye color, what's the state of the postmortem changes, such as rigor mortis or livor mortis. And then with the front and back diagrams, I'm able to show sort of general findings. In this case, because there were so many sharp force injuries and injuries of the head and neck, I saved them for separate diagrams, and this is more for general findings. The most relevant ones that I want to kind of emphasize on is there is marked congestion of the head and neck, but the rest of the body is relatively pale. There were some contusions or blunt force trauma injuries of the remainder of the body. There was a contusion on the upper aspect of the left side of the chest, a contusion on the upper aspect of the right side of the chest. There were abrasions of the right upper extremity. There was a contusion or bruise of the anterior aspect of the right knee, and there was a collapsed blister on the left heel. He also had a gray metal ring that was present on the little finger of the left hand.
Doctor, on the screen, are we now showing page 2 of Exhibit 79?
Yes, we are.
And specifically, I draw your attention to the top right-hand corner of that. There's a depiction or a drawing. What is that?
In the top right-hand drawing is a depiction of the surface of the decedent's tongue. With my crude art skills, I apologize. But I'm depicting where the arc-like abrasions are present on the tongue, and that's at the tip, those curvilinear interrupted abrasions. There was a contusion of the right side of the tip of the tongue, or bruise. And then on the back and middle aspect of the right side of the tongue, there were two parallel, very patterned, very regular indentation rows consistent with a potential ligature being pressed against the neck. Being pressed against the tongue.
Doctor, based on your prior experience with strangulation cases, is that something that is typically seen or ordinarily seen where there's a potential ligature strangulation, that you may see ligature marks not only on the neck but also on other parts of the body?
Yes, it occurs when the ligature shifts during the assault. If the ligature shifts, often the victim or the decedent will try to get their chin underneath the ligature. I can sometimes see injuries across the chin, across the lower lip, or inside the mouth as the ligature is shifting in position before it's placed again on the neck.
Doctor, you mentioned that you were present on scene and had the opportunity to observe two metal dog chains that were collected by law enforcement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And did you note any consistency between those chains that were collected and the marks that you observed on Chad Therian's body?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
When I'm observing injuries or trying to interpret injuries, I am looking for patterns. Anything that I can use to convey to an investigator, hey, you may want to look for this at the scene. In this case, we had very organized, repeating, interrupted indentations on the surface of the tongue, very evenly spaced apart. This would not be inconsistent with the pattern of a chain and the chain links as they twist, leaving separate corner impressions on the surface of the tongue.
Doctor, does the screen now depict the third page of Exhibit 79?
Yes, it does.
And could you describe for the jury the significance of these particular diagrams?
Because there were so many findings, I separated out the head and neck diagrams to a separate diagram. This diagram depicts multiple different views of the decedent's head and neck. Similar to the photograph, we can see that there is congestion of the head above the level of decapitation. In other words, there's purplish discoloration or cyanosis or plethora of the upper aspect of the neck and head, consistent with congestion. On the right side of the decedent's face and nose is an abrasion. There are contusions at the left temple, just above the ear, and at the right temple, just above the ear as well, or bruises. Once I dissected down the neck, I found hemorrhages of the muscles of the neck on the left side and right side of the neck. I also found sharp force injuries of the outer aspect of the left eyebrow and outer aspect of the left upper eyelid, and then also on the left side of the tip of the nose. I believe that these are also post-mortem artifact because they're non-hemorrhagic, there's no redness, there's no swelling. This is consistent with cutting a body that's already been dead. Across the neck, I am depicting the point of decapitation of the decedent. This was roughly at the level of cervical vertebra C5, C6. We have about 7 cervical vertebrae. So it's just above the base of the neck, where we have complete decapitation. In other words, it's going completely through the neck and the head is separate from the remainder of the body. There are also a number of sharp force injuries above and below the level of decapitation, consistent with multiple cuts attempted as the person is trying to get through the neck.
Now, Doctor, does the screen show what is page 4 of Exhibit 79?
Yes, it does.
I don't think I will ask you to describe every injury that's denoted on this particular diagram, as we would be here a while, but could you describe generally what is depicted in this diagram?
Of course. This is a front and back view of the decedent's body, where I'm attempting to show the points of dismemberment, as well as points of sharp force injury that are present. The contusions I've also included here to try to show where they are, or bruises and abrasions. But for the most part, I want to focus on the sharp force trauma. In particular, in this case, we have the head has been decapitated at the level of the lower neck. The back has been largely flayed and defleshed. In other words, the skin of the back has been removed. Also, the muscles of the back have been removed so that we have exposed rib cage and spine. The torso, so extending from about the neck to the groin, has been bisected or cut in half at the level of the lumbar vertebra or the vertebra of the lower spine, so that we have access to the inside of the torso, both the pelvis and the upper aspect of the chest and abdomen. We have attempted amputations at the level of the right shoulder and right elbow. We have numerous cuts and stab wounds of the extremities. When we get to the abdomen and thighs, we have areas of skin removal where flaps of skin have been removed. Where we get to the right thigh, all of the soft tissue has been removed, so we're down to the bone. In other words, all we have is exposed femur for the length of the femur. When we get to the lower extremities, the left lower extremity has been amputated to the level of the knee. The kneecap or patella was recovered separately. We have another amputation from the knee to the level of the ankle, and the left foot was recovered from within the left chest cavity, placed within there. At the right lower extremity, we have, again, the femur, which has been largely defleshed, but I was able to reapproximate the pieces of muscle and pieces of skin to recreate what was there. And then we had the right knee to the right foot still intact.
Doctor, based on your training and experience, what kind of amount of time would be necessary in order to create this sort of disruption to a body?
Objection, speculation,
Overruled.
foundation.
Overruled. It is my medical opinion that this would be quite a few hours. We have decapitation, we have dismemberment, we have transection of the torso. Subsequently, internally, the body has been eviscerated. In other words, we have entered inside the body through various cuts, both at the abdomen and between the ribs, where the victim's organs have been removed, largely one by one. We have castration of the decedent. The decedent has been castrated as well. We have cutting or sawing through chop mark injuries of the bones. It is my medical opinion that this would have taken quite a great deal of time.
And doctor, is the screen now depicting page 5 of Exhibit 79?
Yes, it is.
And what are you attempting to denote here as opposed to on the previous exhibit?
Again, I don't want to overload one particular set of diagrams. So in this set of diagrams, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show the points of skeletal dismemberment. In other words, where on the skeletal system the body has been taken apart. So here I'm illustrating that the head and neck have been severed at the level of C5, C6. I have that the torso has been severed at the level of about L3, L4 of the lumbar spine. I have shown that the pelvis has been cut right at the pubic bone and separated open. I've shown that there is attempt to sharp force trauma at the distal right arm or right humerus, and also at the proximal right forearm or right radius and ulna. I'm showing that we have amputations or severing of the left femur, both just proximal to the hip and at the distal left femur. I have shown that the left kneecap has been separated, and I've also shown that the left lower leg has also been separated at the distal tibia and fibula. At the right lower extremity, the right hip socket has been opened and separated. I have severing of the right lower extremity at the level of the knee, and the kneecap on the right side is received with the lower leg.
Doctor, you had mentioned attempted dismemberment or attempted amputation. Can you describe what you mean by that?
Of course. There are some areas where there are cuts through the muscle and cuts through the skin, but they do not completely transect the limb or extremity. So there's evidence of cutting deeply into these tissues in the postmortem state, but not complete transection, so they are still attached. On the bones, there's multiple evidence of sharp force trauma to the bones, even in areas where the bone is still in one piece. Evidence of previous attempt to cut or saw through or transect the bone. These pieces of bone were
I'm going to object,
collected.
non-responsive.
Just wait for another question, Doctor. Go ahead, Schabusiness.
Doctor, is it typical that in the course of your investigation into a death that you would ask for toxicology to be performed on the decedent?
Yes, it would.
And was that done in this particular case?
Yes, it was.
What were some of the challenges that you faced with respect to toxicology?
The largest challenge was the amount of disruption of the vascular system. This body was essentially bloodless. So what I did is at the scene, I collected a hemorrhagic fluid that was present in one of the containers where the body was kept, with the hope that some of this was blood that was drained from the decedent's remains as they sat within the container. And these were submitted for toxicology. In addition, I saved tissues as well, should there have been a need for that.
Based on your training and experience, are there concerns about the accuracy of the toxicology based on how you had to obtain the fluid for toxicology?
Yes, there are.
And what are those concerns?
This was hemorrhagic fluid that was collected from in this case, the bucket, where a portion of the decedent's remains were recovered. Whether this all represents the decedent's blood, somebody else's blood, substances that may have been present in the bucket before the decedent was placed in there, whether the blood is entirely blood or a combination of blood and cerebrospinal fluid and vomit and other fluids, whether there is water present in the bucket as well. So as a result, these findings are noted, but they should be taken in that context and with those caveats.
And in terms of the toxicology report, what substances did you note from the fluid that was submitted for toxicological testing?
From the fluid that was submitted, we found cocaine. We found cocaine metabolite benzoyl ecgonine. We found methamphetamine. We found amphetamine. We found delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or the active component of marijuana. And I believe we also found nicotine, which is present in most tobacco products.
Now, doctor, you found a number of those substances in the fluid. Are those substances, in your opinion, contributory to Shatharian's death in any way?
I do not believe so, no.
I think you mentioned this earlier, doctor, when you were describing the general process of the autopsy, but is swabbing of the body something that you typically do?
When I suspect that there may be the involvement of another individual within a death, yes, swabbing is something that I typically do.
And is that something that was done in this particular case?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe the process for swabbing and then the process for maintaining the integrity of the evidence that's collected in those swabs?
Of course. Before the body is cleaned or altered in any way, while it is still resting on an evidence sheet, what I do is I collect DNA swabs of the external surfaces of the body. Typically, I'll go for areas where I suspect the greatest possibility of contact. In this case, I believe they are all listed on pages 14 of the autopsy report. So it included the left and right sides of the forehead, the left and right cheeks, the left and right sides of the chin, the left and right sides of the neck, both sides of the chest, what was left of the skin surface of the abdomen, what was left of the skin surface of the back, the left and right arms, the left and right forearms, the left and right wrists, the palmar aspects of the left and right hands, the dorsal aspects of the left and right hands, the skin of the left thigh, the skin of both legs, the skin of both feet, and then I took oral, penile, scrotal, and rectal swabs. And then of all the fragments of skin that were recovered separate from the decedent, I swabbed the skin surfaces of those as well. So those were 12 separate fragments of skin were each swabbed. After that, they're air dried, packaged, and given to law enforcement.
And that process was followed in this case with respect to the integrity of the evidence?
That is correct.
Is it typical that you obtain a swab that's intended to be either a swab or some sort of evidence that is intended to be a known sample for the deceased?
That is correct.
What is the typical process for that?
Typically, we collect what's referred to as a DNA card, which is a blood spot card that is air dried and then subsequently can be used for DNA testing.
Do you know if that was used in this case?
Yes, it was.
Do you know if you also did a buccal swab in this case, or a swab from the inside of the mouth of the decedent?
That's correct. That was with my oral swab that I took earlier.
Nothing further at this time.
Cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Trankita, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Did you determine the time of death and the date of death for the deceased?
At best, I can determine approximately how long a person has been dead. But in terms of determining the time of death and the date of death, we list the time where they're examined by a medical professional.
This particular case, you were contacted by the Brown County Medical Examiner, or Petra Schwab, correct?
She was our Petra Schwab was our lead investigator at the time. That's correct.
Okay. She's not a medical examiner, but she's a director, correct?
I believe now her title is Director of Operations, correct?
And she contacted you to secure your assistance with the investigation in this particular case?
That is correct.
Were you contacted on February 23rd of 2022?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. And you were briefed on some of the issues or what may or may not have happened, correct?
That is correct.
And then you traveled from Madison to where the location on Stony Brook Lane, or where did you go?
That is correct. I traveled to the home on Stony Brook Lane
Okay.
in Green Bay.
And do you recall the time that you got there, roughly? Was it in the
Unfortunately,
morning?
not offhand. I believe it was in the morning, but it's difficult to say. Yeah.
Okay,
It's been a while.
all right. Fair to say that the facts with regards to this case or the circumstances were quite unusual based on your training and experience. Is that fair?
Could you describe what you mean by unusual?
You don't often see situations where there are body parts all over, correct?
I think my line of work is unfortunately very different from others. Fragmentation of people is very common. Motor vehicle accidents, train accidents, people who have jumped from tall buildings or been hit by a subway train. That's not unusual for me. It's something that I see quite often.
How about, a severed head in a bucket and body parts in different locations? Is that unusual for you?
I would say it's not a common occurrence. That's correct.
It's different, correct?
Correct.
And would you agree that those particular facts make it a little bit more challenging when you have to do your autopsy and your testing and your swabs and your analysis? Is that fair?
In what sense, sir?
In the sense that you essentially have to try to understand the global picture. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And so on this particular date, February 23rd of 2022, you went to the Stony Brook Lane property, to the house, and you went inside.
That is correct.
You conferred with several detectives, correct?
That is correct.
Ms. Schwab was there. Is that fair?
That is correct.
And you found human remains in different locations, correct?
That is correct.
You found a head and a penis and testicles in a black bucket, correct?
That is correct, at the base of the stairs.
And then you found some other body parts in a duffel bag. They call it a Jimmy Choo bag on a entertainment center, correct?
I believe so, yes. I believe that was the dark blue bag on the dresser. I'm not very familiar with bags, unfortunately, but yes, that was, I can say color at least, yes.
Okay, sure. Inside that blue bag, as you say, there were lots of plastic shopping bags in there, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Was it hard or difficult to understand what you were actually looking at when you were removing these items from the bag due to having plastic bags inside?
I would say no. I'm fairly comfortable with plastic bags. They're often seen at scenes. And then the recovery of the individual pieces, identifying them, of course, is something that I do fairly regularly, so I was able to start saying, okay, this is clearly a piece of this is clearly a piece of that. As we began to gather the inventory, that becomes a very important part of determining if the entire body is present or whether there might be other pieces at another location or destroyed.
As you moved along in the basement of 829 Stony Brook Lane, you moved towards a pink and black Under Armour backpack, correct?
That is correct.
And there were more human remains in there, correct?
That is correct.
And did you know that these remains belonged to one person, or did you have a concern that, did you have any concerns about that?
Very much. My goal was to determine whether or not there might be more than one person present. So in other words, if I found, for example, 2 patellas from the left side, or if I found 2 left arms, then I would be concerned that there might be more than one decedent present.
And then, as you went through the basement, did the detectives follow you? Did you take the lead, or how did that kind of work?
Typically what's done is the law enforcement has the jurisdiction or the investigation of the scene or the surrounding circumstances. But the body, the investigation of the body and the examination of the body falls under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner. So in this case, also because our goal is to try to prevent contamination and preserve as much evidence as possible, we took the lead where we are wearing Tyvek suits and gloves and masks and trying to collect things in as clean and preserved a way as possible. So we took the lead on that, and law enforcement remained in the background.
This wasn't a perfect situation as far as the basement was concerned because there was lots of clutter down there. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
There was like a table, a Pac-Man machine, all kinds of other items, correct?
That is correct.
You recall seeing 3 mattresses stacked on each other?
Yes, I do.
And then there was another container. Was it such that it was a blue tote?
Yes, there was. I believe it was towards the head of the bed.
And there were human remains in the blue tote, correct?
That is correct.
And on top of the tote, there was blankets or clothing items. Is that fair?
I believe there were, yes.
So fair to say that some of these items that you were attempting to collect may have been tampered with or tainted in some way because of other items being put on top or plastic bags being utilized?
In what way, sir?
If you could just answer my question with due respect.
I'm trying, if my interpretation of tainted with means that DNA evidence could have been lost, potentially, or DNA evidence could have been contaminated, I would say that certainly any object that would have come in contact with the remains could potentially transfer or wipe away DNA evidence. So for example, if the plastic bags had other people's DNA on it, that can be transferred onto the skin surface or body surfaces. If the tote bag had other people's DNA on it, that also can be transferred onto the body surfaces of what's been placed in there. If the bedding or bed sheets also had other people's DNA on it, that could be, or hair samples or fingernail clippings, that also could be transferred onto the body surfaces. So if I understand the question correctly, I think that that's about as good an answer as I can give.
You answered it. I appreciate that.
Perfect.
Did you see evidence of drug usage down in the basement on Stony Brook Lane?
Yes, I did.
Did you see a meth pipe down there and a gem baggie with crystal-like substance?
I believe I saw a glass pipe. I think I recall it was white in color. And then there was, I believe, a small green baggie with a powdery crystalline substance inside.
Did you see any evidence of drugs or drug substances on the decedent's mouth or face?
I did not.
Did you swab for that?
The face was swabbed, yes.
With regards to your report, did you indicate that the deceased had possible acute intoxication due to the combined effects of methamphetamine, amphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana?
That is correct.
From your analysis and assessment and examination of the body, did you in any way opine or conclude that drugs had anything to do with the death of Mr. Therian?
It is my medical opinion that the drugs did not have anything to do with the death of Mr. Therian.
Have you had cases where people overdose on methamphetamine,
Yes, I have.
resulting in death?
Yes, I have.
How do you know that that didn't happen in this particular case?
I know that that did not happen in this particular case because of the extent of hemorrhaging that's present within the decedent's neck and head. In other words, these are antemortem injuries when he still had circulation. In other words, he was still able to bleed. So as a result, I have bruising and contusions of the neck muscles. I have deep hemorrhages of the soft tissues all the way down to the cervical spine, and I have numerous blown hemorrhages of the eyes and oral mucosa and facial skin. To have these, you have to have circulation. You have to have blood pressure. Without it, you'll not get these injuries. You can strangle or stab or punch or hit a dead body as much as you want, but without circulation and without that blood pressure, you're not going to get this kind of hemorrhage.
Do you know if drugs such as methamphetamine could have caused the protuberance of the tongue in the deceased?
Methamphetamine causing protuberance of the tongue?
Yes.
It has not been my experience that it causes that.
When you received the remains in the body bags, was there anything unusual with the manner or way you received the items at the Dane County Medical Examiner's office? Did you have any concerns with what you received?
If I understand the question correctly, did I have any concerns about the manner in which the remains were brought to me or delivered to me?
Yes.
I did not.
Okay. How did you get those items? They obviously were packaged up at the Stony Brook Lane property, correct?
That is correct. And I participated in the packaging.
And then can you take me from there how they arrived at the Dane County Medical Examiner's office?
Of course.
Thank you.
Again, as the bodies were packaged up, the security seal was placed on the bags to show that the body bags are intact and undisturbed. At that point, we contact the driver. The driver from our office comes up to Brown County, collects the remains, then places them into their van. The van is refrigerated, which allows for as best preservation of the remains as we can, and then the body is taken back to Dane County. At that point, the body is checked in to our secured cooler by one of our investigators, and then the body is kept in that secured cooler until such time that we can perform the autopsy examination, which in this case was the 25th.
Thank you. Have you been involved in cases where it's a situation where it's death by asphyxiation, where people engage in choking kind of behaviors?
If I understand the question correctly, yes, I have had cases where people have died from asphyxiation due to choking or strangulation as a mechanism, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can step down.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, everyone.
State's next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Deputy Bryce.
Okay, sir, if you want to just step up right over here, and then before you have a seat, if you could turn and face her, raise your right hand. She'll
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Deputy Bryce Haynes, Haines.
Okay, and Mr. Saunders, the witness is yours.
All right, can you tell us how you're employed?
I'm employed as a patrol deputy with the Brown County Sheriff's Office,
And how long have you been employed in that capacity with the Brown County Sheriff's Office?
approximately 2.5 years.
And is that the totality of your law enforcement experience?
I worked for approximately 1.5 years in the village of Black Creek as a police officer.
But then for the last 2.5 years with the Sheriff's Office?
Correct.
And as a patrol deputy, do you sometimes get called out to respond to incident locations in the county of Brown?
Yes.
And you also have occasion to assist other jurisdictions with their own cases?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I want to ask you, Deputy, then about February 23rd of 2022. Do you recall if you were on duty on that day?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And were you dispatched to a residence on Eastman Avenue on that day?
Yes, I was.
And what was the reason you were dispatched to that location?
So deputies were requested to assist the Green Bay Police Department in locating a vehicle that was involved with what was dispatched as a suspicious situation. They requested that we look for a gold town and country van.
And do you recall approximately what time that call would have come in to your department?
I was dispatched at roughly 4:15 a.m.
And this is on February 23rd?
Correct.
And was there information provided that this van may be located at that Eastman address?
It was my understanding that the possible suspect had been driving the vehicle and staying at that residence.
And did you ultimately arrive at 2523 Eastman Avenue?
Yes.
And is that in the city of Green Bay?
Yes, it is.
And did you locate that reported gold van in the vicinity of that address?
Yes, it was located on the north side of the building.
Deputy, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 80. Do you recognize what Exhibit 80 depicts?
Yes, this is a picture of the gold Chrysler Town and Country minivan.
And the depiction in Exhibit 80, does that appear to be consistent with the scene around the Eastman Avenue address that you encountered?
Yes,
on
it does.
On February 23rd?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And that general layout of where the vehicles were positioned and everything, that's consistent with how you first encountered the scene?
That is correct.
Okay. I'd move Exhibit 80.
Any objection?
No objection.
80 is received.
And I'd ask permission to publish as well.
No objection.
That'll be published to the jury.
Okay, then Deputy, it's behind you, but also there's a screen in front of you if that's easier. So are we looking at Exhibit 80 now presently on the screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So when you arrived at this Eastman address, where are you positioned?
I was positioned, the van's facing south. I was positioned to the northeast of the van.
And when you arrived, you mentioned you were dispatched at 4:15. Do you recall when you would have gotten to this address?
Approximately 4:20, 4:25, probably about 5 to 10 minutes to respond.
And from that time, did you maintain a sort of visual on the vehicle?
Yes, once the vehicle is located.
Did you observe whether the van was occupied or unoccupied at that point?
It appeared unoccupied.
Did you see during the time you were there, any other person walked to or from that vehicle?
No, I did not.
And then how long were you on scene for?
I'm unsure exactly how long I was on scene, maybe 10, 15 minutes.
And when would you have left?
I was relieved by an officer from the Green Bay Police Department.
So you were assisting, I guess, Green Bay, and then once they got there, you sort of left it to them. Is
That is
fair to say?
correct. That is correct.
All right. Thank you, sir. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Deputy Haynes, what time were you relieved by the Green Bay police officer?
I would guess approximately 5 a.m. I do not know the exact time.
Okay. And you were called to go right to the Eastman Avenue apartment complex?
That is correct.
And it's a larger apartment complex where people live, correct?
Correct.
And when you got there on February 23rd of 2022, it was fairly dark outside, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and there was snow on the ground, right?
correct.
And were you told which vehicle to look for?
Yes, we were given the description as well as the license plate for the vehicle.
Did you arrive there by yourself?
No, myself along with two other deputies and our patrol sergeant arrived on scene.
Okay, did you get there first? Did you
I
get
was,
there first?
I arrived first, I believe.
Okay.
We all arrived roughly at the same time.
All right. You took your own squad car?
Correct.
When you got out, then what did you do? Did you walk?
I did
you
not
walk
get
by?
out of my patrol vehicle. I did not approach the vehicle.
Okay. You just parked behind it?
I parked to the northeast of the vehicle, not directly behind the van.
Okay. You didn't get out and walk around the perimeter of the van, is that fair?
That is correct. I did not do that.
And that picture that you saw, the back of that Town and Country minivan, it had all snow on the back window, right?
Correct.
And there was a car to the left and a car to the right of it, correct?
Yes.
And would you say that these vehicles were kind of parked fairly close to each other?
Yes.
When you were sitting in your squad car, could you see inside of the Town and Country minivan?
I could see the side windows. I could not tell if anyone was in the vehicle or not.
Were the windows tinted?
It was dark. I can't tell you if they were tinted any regularly or not.
Okay. Did you see any person, well, strike that. Did you put any police tape out there?
I did not.
When the other Green Bay police officer arrived, then you just left?
Correct.
Did you see anybody walking around the van or in front of the van while you were there?
No.
And the entire time that you were there, you were sitting in your squad?
Correct.
And you didn't see anybody come in or out of that apartment complex?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
Thank you, you can step down. Next witness?
State calls Officer Garth Russell. complex. Did you have contact with that person?
Yes, I did.
And did you ultimately identify that person?
Yes, I did.
And who did you identify her as?
I identified her as Taylor Schabusiness.
The person who you had contact with on February 23rd, as they exited the apartment complex, do you see him or her in court today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please point out what they're wearing and where they're sitting for us?
She's sitting to my right. She's wearing a black, what appears to be a thin jacket and a dark blue dress with a blue and white floral pattern.
I'd ask the record to reflect the witness identified the defendant.
It will so reflect.
No objection.
What happened when you observed Ms. Schabusiness then?
When we observed Mr. Business, I made contact with her. I subsequently placed her in handcuffs and noticed what appeared to be dried blood on her sweatshirt, the front and the back.
And did you make any note of any potential evidence on her hands?
Yes, I also saw what appeared to be smeared blood on both her hands.
During this time, you were working as a patrol officer? Is
Yes,
that
I
right?
was.
And were you utilizing any body-worn camera on that day?
Yes, I was.
And was it operational in your belief?
Yes, it was.
When a particular incident or an arrest is made, is there a way for you to sort of save that body camera footage to a system?
Yes,
Does that allow you the chance to then review that at a later date?
yes,
And then do you enter that into your department system?
yes,
And have you also had the chance to review portions of your body camera footage prior to testifying today?
yes, I did.
Would you recognize it if you were to see it here in court?
Yes.
Judge, I'd ask then to play approximately 4 minutes from Exhibit 81.
The objection, Mr.
No.
Freilich?
No.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
I think we'll dim the lights.
Hitting play at 0 minutes, 0 seconds.
Please, nobody, please, nobody. Nothing. Hey. Is this blood? Does this look like blood to you? Or am I just tripping? Bloody footprint? You see this right here?
Could possibly be blood.
Hey, who did that? Hi, Taylor. How's it going? Officer Russell with the Green Bay Police Department. Just make sure you ain't got nothing on you here. Terry, you have one more for your wrist. Just put your hands behind your back, quick.
Anybody else in your apartment?
You got blood on your hands here, too. No, on your hands. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to.
What apartment kid?
What apartment are you in?
Do you have Adam 3 come up? Hey, Custom, get up here.
On the double.
Which apartment?
One, there's what they came back to. Yeah, go. Guys, hurry and get here now. Watch this window right here. Gun. Go in here. Come to the back of the apartments. That's where we are. You come over here. 2 more will be fine. If 84 is here. You have contact with the male.
Walk out towards me.
Have a seat.
All the traffic. Come towards me. Get on the ground.
Who else is in the apartment? Be straight up. Tomes? Who else? Just Tomes? Is he armed? Nobody's armed?
Nobody's armed.
You sure?
I'm sure.
Bring up police! Everybody get here! Announce yourself now!
Go ahead. Negative, we got enough here.
Okay, and for the record, 4 minutes of that exhibit, actually the entirety of that exhibit was played into the record. Officer, having reviewed that video, do you recognize the video that was depicted?
Yes.
Was that consistent with the body camera worn footage that you were wearing on February 23rd?
Yes.
I'd move exhibit 81.
Any objection?
No.
Received.
So I want to ask just a few questions then, Officer. There's an earlier part in the clip where you had noted some area of suspected blood, is that right?
That's right.
And what do you recall observing?
It looked like a couple of drops of blood in front of the vehicle, along with a footprint that was within, or that encompassed one of the drops.
And I guess was that pointed out to other officers who were on scene?
Yes.
You mentioned then the lights of the vehicle were activated and sort of flash, is that right?
Yes.
And then about 10 seconds later, Ms. Schabusiness exited the apartment?
Yes.
At the end of the video, where were you walking Ms. Schabusiness to?
I was walking her to my patrol car.
And was she, I guess, put in the back of the squad car?
Yes, she was.
Was there any further questioning or anything done at that point?
The only question I asked Ms. Schabusiness was if she knew why we were there.
Okay. And then did you ultimately just transport her then to the Green Bay Police Department?
Yes.
When you got to the Green Bay Police Department, what further steps did you take?
We placed her in interview room 3, I believe, where I had Officer Kenny assist me with taking photographs of what looked like smeared blood on her hands and on her clothing. I also had her remove the sweatshirt that had what appeared to be blood on it, as well as her socks and her shoes.
And then was another officer requested to assist with the further removal of some clothing?
I believe after I left the room, there was another officer that might have been asked to assist with removal of some additional clothing so that Ms. Schabusiness could get temporary clothing because we wanted all her clothes as evidence.
The clothing items that you took, did those stay within your custody and control?
Yes,
And did you subsequently enter them into evidence at the Green Bay Police Department?
I did.
I guess in totality on February 23rd, in your interactions with Ms. Schabusiness, did you ask sometimes some questions of her?
didn't ask questions of her. I more like commands like, hey, please remove your jacket, please remove your hat, let me get your shoes, sit here, just commands, not really questions.
The commands that, or requests that you were giving Ms. Schabusiness, was she in that time following those?
Yes, she was.
Was she, in some instances, responding appropriately
Yes, she was.
in the context of your questions and commands?
Yes, she was.
For instance, did you ask, if there was anyone else in the residence at that point?
I did ask her.
Did she provide a response?
She did.
And was there a person located in the apartment?
Yes, there was.
Thank you, officer. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Thank you. Officer Russell, good morning.
Good morning.
So you were asked to go directly to 2353 Eastman Avenue on February 23rd of 2022, correct?
Yes.
Who asked you to go over there?
I was dispatcher, and Sergeant Bresser also instructed me to go there.
Sergeant Brester?
Yes.
Okay, did you go by yourself?
Several other officers were sent to the location.
And what was the purpose of you going over there?
The purpose of me going over there was to relieve deputies that were on scene, along with assist with the overall incident.
Were you going over there to look at a vehicle or talk to people or what, do you know?
I was tasked, me and other officers were tasked with locating a person who was last seen with the victim, as well as looking at the vehicle as I described earlier.
Okay, so you were asked to go and see if you could make contact with Taylor Schabusiness?
Correct.
Have you been involved in death scene or homicide scene investigations prior to this particular situation?
Yes.
How many?
Death scenes, I can't recall a few, and at least one other homicide scene that I can recall.
Okay. And so on this particular date, you drove over there and you parked your SUV, correct?
That's correct.
And then you walked up, correct?
Yep.
And it was dark and there was a lot of snow on the ground, is that fair?
It was dark, there was snow on the ground. The apartment buildings provided light to the parking lot though.
Was it kind of a glared look outside that apartment complex?
Wouldn't necessarily say a glared look. It was dark, snow on the ground. The lighting from the apartment complex was adequate enough to illuminate the parking lot.
Okay. And is it fair that there are several vehicles all parked in front of the building at 2353 Eastman Avenue?
That is correct.
And did you have a license plate as you walked up?
Yes.
Okay. And on that video, was that you that was shining the light, the flashlight?
Yes.
You found this gold minivan, correct?
I'm sorry?
You found the gold minivan?
I believe before, as we were walking up, the minivan might have been found already.
Okay. You walked around the minivan, correct?
Yes.
The vehicles that were on either side of the minivan were parked fairly close, so there wasn't a lot of room. Is that fair?
There was adequate room for people to get between the vehicles, the minivan and the vehicles parked on either side.
Okay. You walked on the driver's side of the minivan, correct?
I did.
Then you walked around the front of it?
I did.
At some point then, you heard a keyless entry system or some kind of beep?
I didn't hear any beeps. What I saw was a flashing of the parking lights on the vehicle, indicating that somebody might have manipulated a keyless entry system to the vehicle.
Okay. And how many officers were there at the time that you were there?
It was myself, Officer Fisher, along with Officer Whitman, and then Lieutenant Buckman was on the scene somewhere.
And then you, correct?
Yes.
So 4?
I believe other officers arrived while we were on scene as well.
Okay. And at some point, you made contact with Taylor Schabusiness on the step outside the door, correct?
I did.
She was under the overhang, is that correct?
She came out of the common entrance for the apartment complex.
And you asked what her name was, correct?
I introduced myself to her and told her, so I introduced myself to her, if memory serves me correctly. I already knew who she was based on a records check while driving to the scene, looking at her mugshots via police records, which are accurate and reliable as they are kept in the ordinary course of business. I knew what she looked like.
Okay. And are you the one that handcuffed her?
I was.
And when you had contact with her, did you find her to be under the influence of drugs?
No,
Did you ask her if she was using drugs that night?
I did not.
You didn't ask anything about drugs at all, correct?
I did not.
Did she seem off as far as maybe being tired or just acting odd?
She did not.
What about her eyes? Did her eyes seem to be closed or like slits?
She seemed normal to me.
Okay. So then she was cooperative with you, correct?
She was.
When you handcuffed her, did you notice that she had some cuts on her thumbs or on her fingers?
I did not at that time. I did, however, notice a cut on her finger while we were taking pictures of her at a later time at the police department.
Okay, after you got to the Green Bay Police Department, correct?
Yes,
You were working with Officer Kenny then at that time, and you were having him take pictures with his phone, correct?
he used my department-issued phone to take the pictures.
Ultimately, you found out that she went to St. Vincent's Hospital to get some medical care for the lacerations on her fingers, or on her thumbs, correct?
I did not know that she went to St. Vincent's to get any medical care.
Okay. Find any knives on her?
I remember retrieving some items from her person. I don't remember if there was a knife there or not.
Any
When I
guns?
searched her incident to arrest, I don't remember if she had a knife on her or not.
Any guns on her?
I'm sorry?
Any guns?
No.
Okay. At some point then, after she was handcuffed, you had some safety concerns, correct? Or-
Yes.
And other officers did as well?
Yes, other officers had safety concerns inside the apartment.
Okay. And so they unholstered their service revolvers, correct?
Duty weapons.
Duty weapons. And then they directed their attention to the hallway of apartment 1, correct?
They directed their attention to an apartment that was on the lower level inside that common entrance area.
And that was Taylor Schabusiness's apartment, apartment 1?
I am not sure who the apartment is leased to. I just know that she was associated to that apartment per dispatch.
And the other officers were directing their attention to Scott Tomes from apartment 1, correct?
I'm sorry?
The other officers were directing their attention to a person by the name of Scott Tomes in apartment 1, is that fair?
Yes, they were directing their attention to a male inside the apartment.
And he was ordered to the ground at gunpoint, correct?
I remember them ordering him to come out. I don't remember whether he was on the ground at gunpoint or not. My attention was on Ms. Schabusiness at the time.
And you had Ms. Schabusiness come in and basically stand on the steps and ultimately sit down on the steps, correct? You gave her those commands?
I did.
And there was a wall blocking the stairs and the hallway, is that fair?
So the stairway was to the right of the hallway, and there was a short wall. I had her sit on the steps, and you can partially see outside in the hallway by where I was at, but I couldn't see what was going on by the apartment.
And then at some point then after Mr. Tomes was secured, then you walked Ms. Schabusiness to your cruiser, your SUV, correct?
Yes,
And you had her take a seat in the back seat, correct?
I did.
And then you asked her, why, do you know why we're here, correct?
Yes.
You rolled the window down or something, correct?
I may have rolled the window down.
And did she say a warrant? Yeah, a warrant? Or words
Yes.
to that effect?
Yes,
Okay. And then you rolled the window up and then you transported her over to the Green Bay Police Department, is that fair?
I did transport her to the Green Bay Police Department.
That gold minivan that you looked at, that belonged to Scott Holmes, correct?
I don't know who the minivan belonged to.
Okay, nothing further, thank you.
Any redirect, Mr.
No, Your
Saunders?
Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can step down. State's next witness.
Lieutenant Buckman?
All right, if you could just step up right over here, sir, and before you have a seat, if you can turn and face her and raise your right hand, she'll place you under oath.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
Name is Lieutenant Tom Buckman, Buchmann.
Okay, and Mr. Lezay, the witness is yours.
Lieutenant Buckman, can you state how you are employed?
I'm a lieutenant for the Green Bay Police Department.
And how long have you been with the Green Bay Police Department?
I've been with the Green Bay Police Department since 2009, but I've been in law enforcement with two other agencies since 1996.
And you indicated that your current position is lieutenant. How long have you been a lieutenant?
Since 2013.
And prior to your practical law enforcement experience, do you have any education and training to be a law enforcement officer?
Yes. I graduated from Loyola University in Chicago with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and then I attended the Illinois State Police Academy, and then the equivalency test over in Wisconsin to transfer my previous certification over to Wisconsin, and then ongoing training throughout the years.
Were you working as a lieutenant for the Green Bay Police Department on February 23rd of 2022?
Yes.
And were you called in to assist with an ongoing homicide investigation in the early morning hours of that date?
Yes.
What was your role upon initial call-in or response?
I was called in to assist on the road because the officers and supervisors were tied up with the investigation. When I arrived, I spoke with Lieutenant Sobiak, who was sitting on the shift commander's desk. He informed me that...
Objection hearsay, Your Honor.
Merely trying to have him kind of set the table for what he was being asked to do. I don't need a specific answer to that question, though.
All right, questions withdrawn. Go ahead.
After speaking with Lieutenant Sobiak, what did you do?
I went out to the 2300 block of Eastman Avenue. I was informed that there was a gold minivan at that location that was associated with the defendant in the case.
Were you aware who the registered owner of that particular minivan was?
Yes.
And who was that?
Last name was Thomes.
And you indicated you were informed that that van was associated with the defendant. Who are we talking about?
It would be Taylor Schabusiness.
And did you then travel out to the 2353 Eastman Avenue address?
Yes.
What did you do upon arrival there?
Well, there were Brown County deputies that had discovered the van, and they had kept the van under surveillance until they were receiving further instructions on what to do with the van. So myself and other Green Bay officers arrived on the scene and took over surveillance of the van and the apartment building until we received further instructions.
What did your surveillance entail?
Well, we just watched the area where the van was parked at the apartment complex. After a short time, I spoke with a lieutenant that was working the case and asked him what he wanted us to do with the van. And they informed us that they didn't know at that point in the investigation whether Schabusiness was potentially another victim or a suspect, or had the association, what association she had with the victim, or what her role was in the incident. So they told us to approach the van and to try to make contact at the apartment with Taylor Schabusiness and see what we could ascertain from that investigation.
And what steps did you take to do that?
So myself and a couple of officers walked up towards the van. As we approached the van, we looked inside the windows just to see if there was anything, any people inside of it, or any, we knew at that point they hadn't found the body of the victim yet. So we were seeing if there was a body in the van or anything that would stick out as being obvious associated with the crime. As we were stepping next to the van, we were also looking on the ground for footprints leading from the van. I happened to be on the passenger side. I did not see any footprints in the snow at that point from right outside the van. Then, while we were standing next to the van doors unlocked. We heard them unlock, and then the parking lights flashed, which is an indicator that somebody is using a key fob to unlock the van.
At that point, what did you do?
So the officers looked at each other, kind of thought, well, somebody just unlocked this van. A couple of seconds later, Taylor Schabusiness walked out the front door. It's the apartment complex it's got a main door that's shared with the apartments inside. She walked out of the main door of the apartment complex. I recognized her immediately because I already looked up her picture. So I recognized her, and I immediately started approaching her along with other officers. I told her to keep her hands out of her pockets, and another officer put handcuffs on her and placed her under arrest. She had a warrant at that time. Excuse me. She had a warrant at that time, and we knew about the warrant, so they placed her under arrest for the warrant.
Thank you. Did you make any specific observations of Ms. Schabusiness's person when you approached her?
I did not specifically, but I heard officers talking that she had blood on her.
Objection, hearsay. Move to strike.
That's fine.
Okay.
That
I'll
actually-
sustain the objection. The answer is stricken to the extent that he got it out, so go ahead.
Were you able to observe Ms. Schabusiness's face when you approached her?
Yes.
And how did her face appear?
She appeared to be in shock or very surprised to see us. I equate it to a deer in the headlights kind of look, or a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar.
And you indicated that officers then placed her under arrest, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you present when that happened?
Yes.
And were officers giving commands to Ms. Schabusiness?
Yes.
And was she responding to those commands?
Yeah, she was complying with their commands.
Did she appear to understand what officers were saying?
Yes.
Did she appear to have any difficulty or trouble communicating with officers or following commands?
No.
After Ms. Schabusiness was placed under arrest, what did you do?
I then asked what apartment she came from the officers. They informed me that it was apartment 1. I immediately went inside the apartment building. We knew that we had to secure the apartment that she was in. Ms. Schabusiness had blood on her hands when she was arrested, so we knew at that point that there was, she was obviously involved in the incident, in the homicide, so we had to secure that apartment for maybe other victims or other suspects or evidence that would be inside that apartment. So we secured the apartment. I approached the apartment door and pulled out my handgun and held the door. The door was ajar at apartment 1, and I had other officers come in. We were gonna make entry into the apartment to secure it for any other suspects that might be inside, for officer safety.
Did you make contact with any individuals when you arrived at apartment number 1?
Yes, the registered owner of the vehicle, Mr. Thomes, he opened up the door to apartment 1 before we went inside or did anything. He walked out into the lobby area of the apartment building, the main corridor. I gave him instructions to lay down on the ground, put his hands out at his side. He followed those instructions. He was handcuffed by another officer for officer safety, and he was removed from the hallway so that we could enter the apartment.
Did you do a initial sweep of the apartment for officer safety?
Yes, we did.
And again, the purpose of that was merely to sort of secure it then and maintain it for future evidence collection?
Yes, it was to check for suspects that might be hiding in the apartment, also to look for victims, and then to just secure the apartment. So we were only looking for people at that point.
On that initial sweep, did you notice anything in plain view?
No, I did not.
Did you notice anything else as you were leaving the apartment?
When I was leaving the apartment, I did notice on the floor in the main area where approximately where Mr. Thomes was laying down at, when I had commanded him to lay down on the ground, I did see like a tissue that had what looked like to be blood on it and a cigarette. And I pointed those out to Sergeant Schilling. Stayed on scene. I pointed those items out to Sergeant Schilling so that he could let the detectives know that those items were there and whether they wanted to collect them as evidence or not.
And after leaving the apartment, what did you do?
So then I walked out of the apartment and I was informed that there was footprints and possibly a few drops of blood in the snow outside leading up to the apartment building. I then had Officer Whitman, who was on the scene, secure that area with crime scene tape so that it would be preserved for when detectives would come later.
No further questions.
Cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Thank you. Lieutenant Buckman, good morning.
Good morning.
Couple questions for you, sir. So, on February 23rd of 2022, you were asked to go to the 2300 block of Eastman Avenue.
Yes.
Did you get a call from like at home or what?
Well, they called me at home to report into work. I reported into work and then was instructed by the lieutenant that was at the desk, at the shift commander's desk, to go out to 2300 block of Eastman.
What time did you report into work, do you know?
I think it was like 4:42 in the morning.
Was that kind of like your normal shift or is that?
No, I would have started at 6 a.m. They called me in early because of the incident.
Okay, what time did you get to the 2300 block of Eastman Avenue? Approximately.
Maybe 10 minutes later.
And you took your own squad car?
Yeah, I took a squad car that was available.
When you got to the apartment complex, did you park near Officer Garth Russell's squad?
I parked at the east end of the complex. I don't remember if I was next to Officer, I might have been next to Officer Russell and Officer Cups. I don't remember exactly who was all next to me. And I think it might have changed at different times depending on where we were stationed on the parking lot.
You had to walk up, correct?
Yeah, we parked our vehicles further away and we walked up on foot.
What's the purpose of parking farther away?
When you approach in the car, it's easier to see a car approaching than it is a person on foot. And so you want to have that kind of surprise or stealth to be able to walk up on something. If you don't know what you're approaching, we just had a homicide, so we're obviously concerned about people that might be involved in that homicide in the area. We want to approach on foot. You can hear things better if you approach on foot. You can hear, you don't have the car engine noise and the radio from the inside the squad car and whatnot, making additional noise that you won't be able to hear what's going on around you.
And parking back like that, is it true that then you can kind of see the big picture as you walk up to a scene?
Sure.
Okay. You had learned that there was an apparent homicide, correct?
Yes.
And was it true that you were told to try to make contact with Taylor D. Schabusiness?
Yes.
Who told you that?
Lieutenant Bagoon.
Okay. And so you looked up a picture of her to see what she looked like, correct?
Yes, I knew that, I knew her face already because when I was going out to the area, they informed me that Taylor Schabusiness had some sort of relationship with the victim. And so we were going out there because this minivan was associated with Taylor Schabusiness. I didn't know all the details of the homicide because I never went to the scene there. I was just told that this van had an association with Taylor Schabusiness, so when I'm going out there to determine what's going on with Taylor Schabusiness, I wanted to know what she looked like before I got there.
Okay, thank you. Fair to say you'd never met her before, correct?
I don't believe I've ever met her before.
And when you drove to the Eastman Avenue apartment complex, you walked up, did you see the gold Chrysler minivan parked?
Yes.
Where did you see it parked? In relation to like the front door?
So if you go straight out the front door, if you're coming out the door of the apartment building, a few spaces to the right.
Okay.
So not far from the front of the apartment building.
Okay. And is it fair to say that there was a long line of vehicles that were parked in front of the complex? Is that fair?
There are several, yeah, there are several vehicles parked there.
And were there vehicles parked on either side of the minivan?
I know there was a vehicle parked on the right. I don't remember if there was one parked on the left or not. I think there was, but parked on the, if you're driving into the spot, the passenger side, because it was pulled forward like you normally would pull into a spot. And then on the passenger side was the side that I approached. And that, I remember there being another vehicle there.
Okay. When you approached on the passenger side, did you have a flashlight where you looked in the vehicle?
Yeah, briefly.
Did you see anything that was unusual or concerning?
No, I didn't see anything that would spark my attention.
Okay. And when you were approaching the Eastman Avenue apartment complex, was it true that you didn't know, that it was unknown whether Ms. Schabusiness was a suspect or victim? Is that fair?
Right, we didn't know.
But you and other investigating officers were told to be on the lookout for this van, correct?
Yes.
And you found it parked, correct?
I didn't find it parked. Brown County deputies found it parked.
Then you were told that this is the van that's a concern?
I was told that this was a van associated with Ms. Schabusiness.
Okay. Did you later come to find out that the van was owned by Scott Tomes?
Yes, I knew that when we approached it.
Officer Russell was dealing with Ms. Schabusiness, correct?
Correct.
And your task was to focus on whoever else was inside of apartment 1, correct?
That's correct.
And you drew your duty weapon, correct?
Yes.
And then you walked down the hall?
Yeah, it's a very short hall.
Yeah.
To the front of the apartment.
And you ordered Mr. Tomes, Scott Tomes, to get on the ground?
Yes.
And he complied?
Yes.
Did he get a little feisty with you where he was throwing chairs and wondering or yelling, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, he didn't really understand what was going on, but he did comply with my orders.
And at least at this point, your investigation was not far enough into it where you could understand what role any of these parties had, correct?
That's correct.
As it relates to the homicide, correct?
That's correct.
And Officer Russell was there, Officer Fisher was there, you were there, is that true?
Yes,
Officer Cups, and Officer Whitman was also there, right?
that's correct.
Officer Fisher was the one that handcuffed Scott Tomes, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And you did a safety sweep of the apartment, correct?
Correct,
The apartment 1, right?
yes.
And fair to say that you did not see anything in plain view that would be associated with a homicide?
That is correct.
You didn't see any large pools of blood, bloody knives, or body parts in the apartment, correct?
I did not see any of those things inside the apartment, in plain view.
Okay. And then as you were leaving the apartment, when Mr. Tomes was on the floor outside the apartment, there was a small towel-like item, correct?
Yeah, he was no longer on the floor. It's the approximate spot where he was on the floor.
Okay. But it was by him?
It was by where he was.
Okay. Ms. Schabusiness got taken away before Mr. Tomes was exited out of the apartment complex. Is that fair?
I don't know if she was taken away. When I separated from, okay, so Officer Russell put her in custody, put her in handcuffs, and then I entered the apartment building. I did not see Ms. Schabusiness after that. So I don't know at what point they left. I don't know if she was in the back of a squad car, if she had left the scene, or...
And then after this, you brought Mr. Tomes to a squad car, correct?
I did not.
A different officer did?
Yeah, an officer did.
Okay. Was it Officer Fisher?
I don't know.
Then
I was inside the apartment, clearing the apartment, so
Okay.
what happened outside the apartment, I'm not sure.
Okay, fair enough. After that, then did you go check around the apartment complex?
Yes, I did.
You checked the dumpsters?
Yep,
And you checked the parking lot for any indication of evidence?
yes,
Did you find anything?
I did not.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Any redirect? Okay, thank you, officer. You can
Thank you.
sit down. Council, I think we're going to break for lunch. It's 11:45. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our lunch break right now, and I'd ask that you be back in the jury room at 1 o'clock. So about an hour and 15 minutes for lunch, and we'll get underway promptly at 1 o'clock. All rise for the jury.